Bring on the wrecking machine.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is December 23rd, YC127. This is the Eve Universe Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Glad you like the Christmas-themed music. We try to use that during this time. It is 2 days to Christmas, so welcome to those of you who are here. I hope you guys do have a wonderful Christmas time with your family and friends and whatnot. I am here. This is probably not actually the last show of the year. I know a lot of the content creators that you watch have been saying stuff like that. But I actually do still have some plans for potentially as we get through to the end of the year, including a year in review thing. But that's not today. Today, I want to finally do the other thing that I've been promising basically all year, which is a tanking guide, as well as, if I have time, I have my top 10 tips for newer players in EVE. So we'll see if we can knock those two out today as we wrap up this year, because I'm going to tell you this right now, guys, and this is going to be something that you're going to hear me say a lot. This next year is going to be huge for EVE Online. With the upcoming release of, or open beta or whatever you want to call it, of Vanguard and everything that CCP is kind of set up right now, I think that this year is going to be a really, really big year to be involved in EVE. And thanks to the fact that, training takes place over time and you build up over time, now is actually a wonderful time to get started in EVE or return to EVE if you have left, to get ready for what is to come. The best way to avoid the thumbnail is to never undock of what you can't afford to lose. It's nice to be able to afford to lose a Loki. Yeah, I mean, don't undock what you can't afford to lose, but realize that without risk comes no reward. And besides, explosions are fun sometimes. But today we are going to be talking about how to tank your ship so that way, hopefully, it doesn't spontaneously deconstruct in the same sort of way. But before we do that, I do want to jump into the year in numbers. CCP yesterday released a dev blog that is kind of highlighting this year's numbers. Usually they've done stuff like this most years. I've actually really appreciated it when they give you like a personalized one in like email. I didn't see that this year, but we did get like these general numbers. I did pull up, I couldn't find anything from 2024. or 2023's didn't have good numbers, but I did find stuff from 2022. So we might look at that too as we go through this. So let's just jump into it, shall we? Monumentous Capsuleers. As the year comes to a close, we look back on the year of EVE Online and celebrate Capsuleer achievements, standout moments, and a lot of big numbers. Again, I do want, like, in the next few days, preferably closer to the New Year's, we will be doing a stream where we kind of go over all the different stuff that has happened this year and kind of take a look back and see what has gone well, what has gone maybe not so well or whatever, and prepare for next year. But CCP put out their thing. The Legion expansion introduced freelance jobs, letting Capsuleers earn ISK and build reputation through player-created missions, while offering corporations a new way to grow. 2 powerful new ships entered the battlefield, the Barbaraga, a Triglavian Marauder, and the Sarathiel, the Angel Cartel Dreadnought. New sovereignty upgrades provided greater strategic control and flexibility, while Corporation Colors got a hex-coded upgrade. Here are the standout statistics for the Legion expansion. The Sarathiel, we have 237 of them manufactured, and only 5 of them destroyed. That's unfortunate, although, you know, it is what it is. I know that, you know, these are pretty spendy beasts, so the chances of somebody using them in a risky sort of situation is probably pretty low. There has been some pretty good dread brawls. It'd be interesting to find out who all has these 237, because, you know, I know that there's been a lot of angel farming, and it'll be interesting to see which ones kind of come out on top there. The Barbaraga, on the other hand, has 2,189 of them manufactured and 229 of them destroyed. I don't know, guys. Has the Barbaraga been successful? I know that we built a couple and have failed to basically sell one of them. So I don't know. I really want to use one, but the problem is that they're so expensive to build. They almost become difficult to you know, deploy, because the value that they bring doesn't quite match the risk that they bring. But they are still a really fun ship, and hopefully we'll be playing around with that. Maybe at some point by the end of the year. We'll see. If you guys want to see me fly around in my Barbaraga and hopefully not get blown up, let me know. 229 of them destroyed suggests that just around 10% of all Barbaragas that have been manufactured have been destroyed, which is pretty wild. It would be cool to look up. Hold on a second, actually. Let's just do this. This is going to be really, really, really rudimentary, but if we go... Actually, I'm going to start heading to Dodixie right now, because I need to be there for the tanking guide, or at least I plan on being there for the tanking guide. I just wanted to have somewhere pretty for us to look at while we were setting up for the stream, or for the pre-show rather. Okay, so we are going to view this in industry, and we're going to see that the Barbaraga, it costs 5.3 billion ISK to build. That's, of course, all of this is going to be estimated, but, you know, we're just checking it out. And it sells for 6 billion. So they're theoretically still profitable to build, in theory. Now, a lot of that value does come from the trig stuff. Does it not have the totals here? I thought you could hover over the... No? I thought you could hover over the sub pieces to get their estimates too, but... Oh, well, yeah, the problem is that, like, Marauders are cool and all, but a 5 billion ISK Marauder, that's a hell of a lot of Marauder, and they're already high targets. Now, the nice thing about that is that, you know, with their, so that it's kind of a conflict, right? Because, like, gankers, first of all, there are some gankers that are going to want to kill this thing just for the sake of killing it, obviously. But, you know, a lot of gankers are going to want to gank it for the stuff that drops, and the value of the ship itself doesn't drop. So in theory, if you fit it fairly, you know, conservatively, you could, it could not necessarily be worth ganking. People might still do it anyways. But I think that I honestly think that probably a lot of people see this price tag and figure that they have to bling up the fit in order to justify it, and that bling on the fit is the very thing that makes them a high priority target for gankers. But yeah, I really do. I still have mine, and we should play around with it some. But I haven't quite actually gone out and done that yet because there's just been so much to do this year. But let me know if you guys have been flying around in any Babaragas or if you're one of the people that have lost one. Let me get my final warp off. All right. So then total number of freelance jobs created, 9,190 freelance jobs created. That feels like a good amount. When did Legion come out? Legion came out in April. So that's, I mean, that's close to about, I mean, let's call it a little over 1,000 jobs a month, right? Just about. That feels okay. I mean, that's a relatively successful feature. I wonder how many of them have been completed. I'm not sure. Let's see. Is that all that we got from this? Yeah. All right. So then with the Catalyst expansion, which is the one that just happened, sparked a resource rush across New Eden with the discovery of prismaticite harvest from phased asteroids. The mining experience was overhauled with critical hits and mining mutaplasmids being introduced, or debuted the Pioneer mining destroyer along with the Consortium and Tech 2 variants, and the Sister of Eve debuted a new vessel, the Odysseus-class Expedition Command Ship. A new 2D star mat, Plex storage logs, carrier update, and access control list for freelance jobs rounded out the expansion. Here's the standout statistics for the Catalyst expansion. Man, the Catalyst expansion was so much more successful than the Legion expansion. It's just, especially seeing it like written out there, you know, whatever. So that's crazy. So like 2,189 Barbaragas have been made in what, 8-9 months versus 2,651 Odysseus's made in just about a month. Now, admittedly, the Odysseus is cheaper, but not by much. I mean, you're talking about a 6 billion ISK Marauder versus a 2.5 billion ISK battlecruiser. They're roughly the same amount of absolutely blingy, crazy amount of bling. However, I think that the Odysseus, I mean, it's clear that the Odysseus has more of a defined purpose in the game, right? Like a Marauder with a escalating gun is pretty strong, but like, oh my god, high damage is like a very competitive field. Lots of other Marauders are fine. You have to, with the price tag of a Babaraga, 9 times out of 10, you're going to bring a Dread instead. There's a few niche places to see a Babaraga, but like you really have to think it through and want to bring one. Whereas the Odysseus is a clear standout in several ways. Most importantly, I'd say in wormholes, right? Like, you know, we are talking about, and there has been a lot of talk about wormhole updates coming in the next year. And I think that, and I've said this many times before, people have completely I feel like we do not give enough credit for the Catalyst expansion and the introduction of the Odysseus as being a critical piece to wormholers. Because, first of all, wormholers have a lot of ISK, so the value of the Odysseus is less impactful, but the Odysseus is so good for wormholers. Between the ability to use the Entangler, which makes it so that it become like basically a needle. It becomes one of the best rolling ships in the game, especially shy of a battleship. It's got cool exploration boosts and like effects to appear in various different systems, especially wormhole systems. The Odysseus is just like one of the coolest wormhole ships to just have on hand for utility, if nothing else. I've been loving to play around with mine. Obviously, the fact that you can carry ships along with it, a couple of frigates with it, is very cool. Very popular ship. 54 of them destroyed, including one of mine by drifters. That number is probably going to go up as people use them more. The Pioneer, 71,873 of them manufactured, with 4,113 of them destroyed. I assume this is actually kind of a crazy stat for me because I don't know what they mean by manufactured, because the Epic Arc itself gives you a Pioneer, which means anybody who's building Pioneers are having to compete with the fact that people can do a quick three mission Epic Arc in order to get a free Pioneer. That and the Pioneer blueprint itself comes from Outer Rings Excavation, which is not a trivial thing to get a blueprint from. You know, you have to go to the nullsec and pick up the blueprint there and somehow get it back to highsec or wherever it is that you have your manufacturing and then build it. So I suspect that this 71,000 may include the people that did the event. You can account for 100 of those manufactured. Okay, well, I mean, if people are manufacturing them on top of the ones being built for free, that's okay. You know what? Fair enough. Actually, let's check out. Let's check it out. Pioneer. So if we pull up the Pioneer blueprint, we view it in industry. Now, obviously, since it's a BPO rather, I could research this and get 10% better, but it's about 5 million ISK to build and 7 million ISK to sell. And that's estimated again. You know, the prices of minerals are actually dropping, and also, ooh, yeah, this estimate is definitely low. Let's go ahead and let's just see what happens if I want to buy the missing materials, which should be all of it. Right now, I would get 4.5 million, but then if I went to go sell it, I would get 4.5 million. So right now, if I was to just build the Pioneer with no research, no efficiency whatsoever, I am basically losing money. But I assume that if you go to JITA, you use better research, you know, whatever, then that would make it so that you could probably still profit off of them. But again, like, you have to compete with the fact that people can just make them for free. Ombre and Kernite returning to highsec has been the biggest blessing of Catalyst. I agree. I also really like the whole escalation side of things too. And honestly, I think that mining crits have been pretty successful, especially when it comes to the ice mining. I think that the mining crits, with how it relates to ice mining, especially when it comes to the event that's been going on, the winter event, perfect timing for everything. But yeah, I think it's kind of crazy that 71,000 of these has been manufactured. I still think that some of those might be the ones that were given away for free. Like, yeah, I mean, not given away for free, but given away for doing the event, or the, you know what I mean? The Epic Arc. The Outrider, 8,000 of them have been manufactured. Almost 9,000 of them have been manufactured, with 300 of them destroyed. I wonder how many of these 310 have been destroyed, like, within the last, like, since the winter event started. Here, hold on a second, actually. Golly, this is kind of cool. Hold on. Z-kill. Uh-oh. Babaraga died. Yep, it's in wormhole space. Oof. Golly. I mean, I guess if you're going to have a Babaraga, you might as well have it be this blingy. Golly. Zoria's super title Entropic Disintegrator. That thing's 1.5 billion by itself. Some probably pretty juicy abyssals, but we'll probably never know. Dead Space faction modules. Ooh. This guy did not want to lose this ship. But he did. He did. You got some nesters in that kill. That's a crazy kill. At any rate, we were looking for Pioneers. No, Outriders. My guess is that the vast majority of these Outriders are going to be dying in event sites, right? Let's see. Losses. Let's just pick a couple of these randomly. Placid. I don't know. Some of these are in wormhole space. Let's just check it out. Let's see. This one died by a Proteus, so nope. This is not. We can tell that it's not in an event. Oh yeah, this one was gas huffing with some abyssal gas scoops. Woo. Man, these guys have too much money. All right, this one is in a combat setup, but died to ships. That means that it died outside of one of the event sites. This one is a combat one, also died outside of an event site. Maybe I'm just wrong. This one also died. Man, wait, hold on. Can you imagine hot dropping an Odysseus? Or, sorry, an Outrider? Jesus. Okay. Well, good to see that Test Alliance is making good use of their time, dropping, what, 8 plus, 9 plus Black Ops battleships to kill one command destroyer. That is crazy. Spent more fuel. All right. Is any of these going to be in event sites? A Heron Navy issue soloed a Brave Newbies. This one's trying to mine, I guess, in Tenerifis. I feel like I'm going insane reading some of these. This is a Loki. I'm legitimately surprised that all of these Outriders are dying doing something other than... here we go. This one died in the event. I guess maybe the Outriders aren't dying in the event sites because they're killing things. Apparently this one took on one too many of the endurances because he eventually died. But he probably died because, look at this, he doesn't have any weapons. Huh. Yeah, he got. In fact, this Outrider, or this Endurance is using autocannon. So this was totally, this guy got whoopsie-daisied. This guy got bamboozled. I know he has drones, but my point is that he's not. So a lot of these guys that are prepared to fight in the event sites are coming with guns and tanking bursts. This guy has mining bursts, so he's obviously being like a supporter of a fleet or something like that. Here we go. This guy was fit to fight. See, he's got guns, he's got webs, he's got scram. This guy came in to fight, but picked a fight with really three barges and an endurance was enough to take it down. Feels bad, man. Why Baba and C? That was a C2? That is so weird. I imagine it was bashing. Like, my expectation, the reason why you would have a Babaraga in a wormhole for most reasons, or for most cases, would be to bash a structure, right? Yeah, no, Sedition just got eaten by these four. Too bad. What was the fit? Yeah, one extender and a reinforcer. I'm actually kind of surprised that this guy got. Wait, hold on. Well, it is worth the whole. Here's the kicker. Okay, here's the reason why this Outrider actually got. Hold on, let's check this out. If we export this, This is going to be a bit of a preview, maybe, of the tanking guide. But if we go into our fitting window and we simulate from clipboard. No, actually. Never mind. I thought that this guy was going to have a significantly... No, it has an EM reinforcer. Never mind. And a multispectrum. That's kind of wild that he got then. Be careful out there, I guess. If I remember, aren't it slippery and all? Yeah, no, they weren't skiffs. I checked that. They weren't skiffs. It was a procurer, a coveter, a procurer, 2 coveters, and an endurance. So it is actually kind of surprising. I did notice that they use infiltrators, which is EM damage, and that usually is pretty good against shield resistances. But as we saw, his shield resistances were actually, like, not their worst. Thermal would have been better. But yeah, just a little bit too much. Managed to get grabbed. It's hard to tell overall, although the proc did do over half of the damage. So then there's this one, which was outside, just a Cinnable. Got it. This one is also, looks like it's inside one of the event sites. Retriever. Wow. Okay. So imagine fitting out your Outrider. He is fit for mining, though. See, he tried to, like, get a little bit of both by going fast, but also having enough for mining bursts. Also, wait, hold on. Okay, can use 1. So wait, hold on. The other ones that I saw. Okay, this one also has 2. That's skirmish. And this one has 1 command burst. Okay. I was just trying to check because this guy has a command processor in order to use both of the mining bursts. But got killed by 4 retrievers. That's gotta be rough. Did he get any of them? Oh, it was more complicated than that. This is probably confusing multiple things together. Hard to say. All right, and then this one definitely died outside. Looks like somebody was hunting down, potentially hunting down. Well, this is in Declan, so who knows? That's a lot of Abyssal mods, though. Oh my gosh. And a Dark Blood, Dark Blood Scrambler and an Abyssal Warp Disruptor. All these mutated stuff. Dark Bloods. Now, obviously, these Abyssals could be crap, but, I mean, given everything else, given the fact that there's a Dark Blood Warp Scrambler, chances are it's not crap. So, an Abyssal Damage Control dropped, an Abyssal Drone Damage. Yeah. Good day. Good day to kill an Outrider, I guess. From Slice. And then this one just died to rats. All right, well. Oh, that's a clone. Okay, so this guy might have even been, I think he was probably in an event site. This is one of the dangers of being in one of these event sites. No, well, there's no ice in the cargo. Oh, yeah, it can't mine, right? So it's just being there supportive. And it's got 2 mining bursts and a shield burst, but none of that was useful when you get popped by a clone soldier. This is one of the big things. If you're doing the low-sec mining, one of the biggest threats that you have is actually these clone soldiers or officers spawning and just wrecking your day. You just killed a Saber on an ESS gate with an ENI. Congratulations. Retrievers aren't all that weak when they get their tanking buff. That's possible. I mean, really, it's just the unified drones, right? Combat Procurer and Skiff is my second favorite trap to spring. Skiffs are so good at PvP that people don't recognize. All right. Either way, we just poked at this. Apparently, Outriders are being used all over the place. I wonder actually, well, it's hard to say. Let's look at, hold on, let's see. Are there any Outriders that like stand out in value? 500 million. Did we already look at that one? Do. 800 million. That's juicy. 500. 500. Okay, let's just look at these and then we can move on to the next thing. This one is the one that we just looked at. Here is a Gnosis. So, hold on. Holy shit, what is going on in this? What is going on? Wait. Whoa. Okay. So, who is mining in low sec with a barely fit Outrider, 2 mid slots open, 3 low slots open, 2 rigs open. The only real thing, so you've got your survey chipset, you've got your micro warp drive. I don't know why we even have a flux coil at this point. No mining upgrades, but triple ore miners. This guy is just out there to be a loot pinata, and loot pinata he is. One of the ore miners dropped, and the 135 million-isk flux coil drop for, like, why? Don't do this. At some point, I want to fly the Pioneer ship. Pioneer ship's easy to get. Go ahead and fly one. They're great. That one was wild, though. Okay, so now we have another one that's super expensive. This one is, well, 500 million. Syndicate gas scoops. Does this thing have hold on. Does this thing have bonuses for gas scoops? I can't remember. No. Yeah, no, it does not. So all of these gas scoopers that we're finding, kind of odd. Although probably it goes good with like as the boot. No, does the mining laser optimization charge affect gas cloud scoops? I don't think so, right? Like, it does? Oh, okay. Well, fair enough then. In that case, this might make sense. The mining time reduction works. Okay. Well, then this might make sense. He is mining fullerite and got. Triple syndicate gas scout. I argue that there's probably going to be a better ship to have fit these gas cloud scoops on. Got by an Astero, which is pretty wild by itself. That's a happy Astero pilot. Well, was until he lost his to a sleeper. Is this? Oh no, that's a Praxis. Okay, I'm about to say, did he just solo an Oracle in a Astero? But no, he's in a Praxis. Okay, and then this guy is is this the? This is a different guy. This is a different gas huffer. Am I missing something critical in that these guys are... I mean, yes, I did look for like the most expensive fits, obviously, and that lends itself to, I guess, triple syndicate gas cloud scoops. But like, does this actually make sense, guys? I don't know. Like, he just dropped 300 million. I feel like there's probably better gas huffers. But this guy got by a Saber and a Stratios. All right. Either way. Fractured Legacy. So this is the epic arc that we were just talking about. Completing this epic arc gives you a free Pioneer. It doesn't. This isn't that much faster than a Venture. Huh. I mean, theoretically, you can micro jump drive, but obviously these guys are failing to in time. All right, so we can see here that the Fractured Legacy, 19,000 people completed the first mission, with 16,700 completing the second, and 16,000 almost even completing the third. So there is about a couple thousand, so maybe 10% of people start complete the first mission, but then do not go on. But most of the people, like 95% of the people that complete the second mission, also complete the third mission. Makes sense. Total visits to phase field sites, 24,543. This number seems very... Oh, your arc is still bugged? Oh, yeah, that's a good point. There may be a certain percentage of people that just like got broken somewhere around this point, so they were able to finish the first one, but wasn't able to finish the second one. Does the first mission give the Pioneer? I thought it was the last mission that gives the Pioneer. Is that true? Oh, okay. Well, that... Oh, right. The first one gives the Pioneer, and then the last one gives like an extra doodad, or like a BPC for the phased field, right? Okay. So I'm actually surprised that we don't see more of a drop off then, as people just do the first mission for the Pioneer and then leave. So that's actually kind of interesting that in spite of the fact that they get the Pioneer at first, most people, 90% of people, continue on to complete the, well, not 90, but like 80% of people continue on to complete the entire thing. All right. Total visits to phase field sites, 24,000. That seems a lot. That seems like a lot, especially since these are so new. We're still like about a month. So that's what, like 800 plus visits to phase fields every day. That seems crazy to me. I don't know how that's happening. I guess some people, like when they're open for that second half, that counts the epic arc phase field. Does it really? That's lame, if that's true. Is that true? That feels lame. So, like, this includes the people, so 19,000 of these. That still means that 50,000 Pioneers have been built. That means twice as many, over twice as many. I'm just saying, even if JV Taylor is correct, if we just step into that world and say that they are correct, that still means twice as many Pioneers have been manufactured than spawned via the epic arc, which feels really crazy to me, honestly. And then also that means that no, that's impossible. Well, yeah, no, never mind. So that means that, like, what was it? The phase field is the phase field in a third event? So, like, we're talking about 8,000 phase fields of sites visits. That feels a lot more likely, but there's a lot of things that these numbers have that kind of confuses me a little bit. But you know, it is very possible that, like, as the phase field is open, then people just warp in just to check it out and then leave. Recent dev chat mentioned specifically that the epic arc was allowing high-sec pilots to see the new phase field sites. Yeah. No, yeah. It's true. Like, it lets you check out the phase field, and that is one of the big points of the epic arc. But the point is that, like, whether or not it actually counts as visiting a phase field site. But the numbers do make a lot more sense in that way. Oh, the phase field is the first mission. The second is mining Veldspar. The final is the minefield. Right. I remember now. Okay, so that means that only 5,000 people have visited phase field sites. Again, this feels so much more realistic, all things considered. I don't think... Like, I I don't think phase fields are that popular, not even necessarily because they're bad. I mean, they're not bad. It's just that they're inherently designed to be stupid dangerous. So, and they're relatively rare. Wait. Class 1 ore. And by relatively rare, I mean that currently there's no phase fields in all of EVE. Is that? That doesn't feel right. Is this just not reporting them? There was a report of a phase field just yesterday that I got. Hold on. Yeah, if we go to agency, go to resource harvesting, phase fields. This does not show us any. Maybe, I mean, they might be all in an undiscovered state, but I assume, you know, I've always assumed that basically half of the phase fields are undiscovered at any given time. So the fact that there are none of them currently exposed, it seems very strange to me. Huh. Yeah. Maybe. That's kind of crazy. Everything else is working. Yep, that works. That works. Huh. All right. Either way. Alliance Tournament 21. Congratulations are in order to Tusker Co., who emerged victorious for the second year in a row in the Alliance Tournament 21. See the AT wrap-up for the juicy statistics. A total of 54 alliances participated in 140 matches in this year's tournament. There are 711 kills worth an estimated 1.52 trillion ISK, with the most valuable flagship being 210 billion. And on the subject of expert marksmanship, congratulations are in order to the most valuable solo kill mail and commiserations for the most expensive ship loss. So we have these two losses here. We have Fraternity losing a, what is this, a Python? Is that what they're called now? Yeah, the Python Black Ops battleship. This thing is blingy as hell, which it absolutely should be. Finally hit the right paths with the network, and we have been seen. They are waiting. What are you talking about? Yeah, this guy got hot dropped, or Black Ops dropped by, looks like Snuffed, or at least one person from Snuffed and a bunch of people from the Initiative and Brave. Oh, there's some goons. Here we go. We got 8 Initiative. Just like, it looks like everybody just dumped on this. Might have been like a NPSI or something. Killing Fraternity. Wait, hold on. So one Fraternity member helped kill Fraternity. Hold on, let's double check that. Oh yeah, it's, huh, yeah. This guy is in Fraternity and helped kill a Python in Fraternity. I wonder if there's a story behind that. And then the other AT ship here, which is the Shepash, which I think is from 2 years ago, solo killed by a tornado in Jeddah. Let me tell you, yep, those NATOs in Jeddah, they will sack themselves if they are given any kind of chance to get a good kill. This is definitely one of them. Blam, probably dead before they even noticed that something was wrong. This is why you have 0 bookmarks and undocked bookmarks. Yeah, just outside of Jeddah 4-4, somebody got a hold of him and got him. Nasty, nasty. Looks like Burst Jammer, so might have been attempting to remove tackle if he was in a response fleet. What, the Python? Oh, yeah. Good point. Good point. Good point. That is a possibly a burst jammer. So he might have actually been trying to save his friend, not get on the kill. But you know, getting on the kill is just a perk, right? All right. Or a spy. But I think that the jam is a good point. Because like, why would you need to worry about jamming it too much, given that situation? So it looks like he probably was trying to save his buddy, but maybe I don't know. It's very sus that he's also in a Black Ops during a Black Ops drop. That's all I'm saying. All right, so the capsular empires and communities have not stood still in 2025, be it fighting, moving, or political intrigue. There's major upsets, including a collapse of the storied PanFan coalition. 12,406 structures destroyed. A total of, hold on, 1,000 million, billion, trillion, quadrillion? 1 quadrillion, 1.1 quadrillion ISK destroyed this year. That's a lot of ISK destroyed. And then most undocks by ship. We have the number one being the Venture all year in HiSec, which is pretty crazy, but I guess kind of makes sense. You got to remember a lot of things in HiSec is going to be highly influenced by newer players. We'll get there, Malak. The Heron number 2 and the Retriever number 3. That's actually interesting. The Retriever does require either Omega or an expert system, but it also, the Retriever becomes like one of the best just high-sec grinding mining ships because it has the largest ore hold. The Heron is, of course, one of the the most popular Tech 1 exploration ships. So these two very much show like a newbie focus, with the Retriever being, you know, I guess showing how much focus on industry, especially high-sec mining, has been going on this year, with pyrite being worth so much. High-sec mining has been crazy good this year compared to other years a lot. In low-sec, though, this is actually kind of wild. Venture Astero Prospect. This, I'm very surprised by this numbers. Now, the Ventures are a mixture of people mining and also potentially Sinos. The Prospect is 100% miners, gas huffers, etc. That is probably the most surprising, that the Prospect beats out every single faction. Like, I can't believe the Prospect beats out the Tristan. I'm just going to say it that way, right? Where like, or the Algos. You know, these ships that are very, very popular in faction warfare, that gets used a lot. The Prospect beating them out is pretty wild to me, but it just shows like how much of a focus on the non-combat aspects of the game there really is, right? Which again, like, this is one of those things. Nobody would have thought that Catalyst was going to be as popular as it is, being a mining, exploration, PvE-ish kind of thing. But like, the numbers show that the people actually do a lot of exploration and mining, even in low-sec. Factions. The faction ships has 4 variants each. Would be interesting to see the top 10. Mining ships have fewer variants. It is correct that, like, you're concentrating a bunch of, like, you know, the combat ships are spread out across all of the possible combat ships, but the only mining frigate, at least for most of the year, was the Venture. So that makes sense. That's what I'm saying. Like, the Prospect being on this list is the one that surprises me the most, given the fact that it's kind of more of a specialty ship, being a Tech 2. The fact that it beats out Tech 1. The Astero is also a very expensive ship. I'm surprised that the Astero beats out all of the other exploration Tech 1 frigates, like, for instance, the Heron. But yeah, there you go. Most undocks by ship in nullsec, once again, showing off that we are all about money first. We have the Hulk, the Mackinac, and the Ishtar as number 1. Ishtar ratting is, of course, still extraordinarily popular. Astero can do a lot in low sec that a regular exploration ship can't. Wait. What can an Astero do in low sec that a normal exploration ship can't? I mean, besides kill other exploration ships. Oh, are you talking about, like, The only thing I can think of is covert, like ghost sites. But even then, I'd still do that in a Tech 1 frigate if I needed to. I don't know. Most undocks by ship in wormholes. Again, continuing to understand that we are PvE and resource gathering group first. We see the Buzzard, which is, of course, one of the most popular covert ops ships. The Prospect, which, again, like, really good ice, or, like, gas huffing, really good, like, ninja mining here and there. And the Epithal, of course, one of the biggest advantages of wormhole space that people don't necessarily talk about is because it's nullsec, it has the best PI. So even a low-class wormhole has really good PI. So, you know, the Epithal becomes a major ship that gets undocked a lot. While still being able to do the hacking. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I find it kind of telling that the low-sec Astero versus Wormhole's Buzzard, I feel like there's something there, but not sure without actually having real numbers. So Squalls haven't reached J-Space yet? Well, the thing is that, like, a Squall is good for PI, for sure, but they're still a lot more expensive. So if you're just, especially as a wormholer group that's just trying to keep, you know, people stocked and a bunch of people having epithals, or, you know, like doing their PI, just having epithals ends up being a better, more expendable, and also easier to train into. You know, alphas can't do PI, so, but still, like, a lot of people, like, it's a no-brainer to train into an epithal. The Squall is still a little bit more specialty comparatively. And then Pochvin. So, I am curious as to how many of these Lokis are PvPers. This is one of the only, like, really of the top ones. This is the only one that kind of suspects that it's more of a PvP ship potentially. But the Vargar and the Bargus almost certainly are, once again, like, PvEers attempting to do the big observatory site, etc. Buzzards can't do wormhole combat sites, and Astero can ninja any 3 of 10s and 4 of 10s. They scan down. And unrated sites isn't battleship hit heavy. An Astero can do a 4. Well, yeah, maybe. I use Stratioses a lot for, like, low sec combat sites sometimes. Those are PvE Logi ships, the Lokis. Oh, yeah, that's fair. It's crazy, though, because you would think that if that was true, like, whatever it is that they're lodging, there'd be more of them than there are of the Lokis. I mean, I guess there's going to be multiple purposes for the Lokis coming out. It really just shows that, like, wormholers like to use T3 cruisers. The most popular T3 cruiser right now is a Loki. So all of those other factors kind of feed into that, right? Oh, I'm sorry. This is Pochvin anyways, not wormholers. But you know what I mean. Pochvin's kind of like a wormhole. Hold on. I'm actually kind of chilly. Let me put on my coat for a little bit. Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. I get you. So the Loki is lodging for the Bargist and the Vargar. That's possible too. I mean, that's very likely. But I think that the reason why it becomes number one, you would think that if that was the main use of the Loki, then you would see the Vargars and the Bargist be above it. But the Loki has so many different uses that we see a lot of people using the Loki in that and other purposes, which puts it in the number one spot. That's my guess. Total volume of ore mined. Let's see. 1,000 million billion trillion. 2 trillion ore mined. M3. So this is actually one of the few ones that I have from a couple years ago. So in 2022, they put out numbers. They didn't put out numbers in 2023 or 2024 that I saw. But we do have this with, where is it? Ore and gas mined. So this is a bit different. This is 1.44 trillion versus 1,000 million billion. Yeah, 2.2 trillion. So we see it go from 1.44 trillion with ore and gas. I assume that this is just ore, and it's almost, it's what, 180% or so higher than it was 2 years ago. Significantly more mining occurring this year versus last year. It would be pretty insane. Well, we could go look at the MERs to see. Actually, hold on. Let's go look at the latest MER real quick. Nope, this is the universe portal. Hold on. If we look at this velocity, God, what? Wait, why is there? Where's the? Do we not wait? Did we not get the graph of like? Oh wait, hold on. Nope, that's destruction proportion, production proportion, mined proportion. Mining, production, and destruction history. Here we go. So we can see here, yeah, 2022 was all the way down here. And then 2025 has been up significantly above it all year. So that makes sense. That's mining, right? Nope, that's production. Mining is green. So it actually went from down here to, it's not nearly as remarkable, but it is definitely higher for most of this entire year. I find it kind of crazy. Okay, so the value here that we see this dip, I imagine that's not a dip in volume. That's a dip in the value after changes were being done. Interesting. Yeah, green is value. Yeah, I know I got it wrong at first. I got it corrected. All right, total value of all refined minerals. We have 1,000, million, billion, trillion, 380 trillion, which, like, so, Malak, you said earlier, especially when you look at refined minerals, and I saw somebody talking about this, and I just feel like people got the numbers wrong, because this is 1,000, million, billion, trillion, 380 trillion-isk worth of refined materials. But if we look at the destroyed, it's quadrillion. So this is almost 4 times as much. Where's the 5? I don't see any. What? Where's the 500 quadrillion? I don't see 500 quadrillion anywhere. That would be crazy. Because this shows that, like, 4 times as much. Maybe it got edited. Was it wrong? Is that what happened? Not all of the value of destroyed assets is made purely of minerals. I understand that, and I agree. And, like, we don't see bounties coming in. Okay, so they published the wrong number, and then they corrected it. Is that what happened? That makes sense. That's why everybody was freaking out. Okay. So, either way, it looks like about 4 times as much was destroyed as was mined, which again, especially given this giant spike of destruction here at the very end, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Because that was almost 4 trillion in a month. That seems so weird, though, because that, like, this line, I don't know. Lots of keep stars going boom. That's fair. And those keep stars are basically not made of any minerals at all. It just feels like these two lines don't match that number, right? Like this doesn't feel like it's 4 times higher than this one. That's weird. Anyway, we bid a fond farewell to 2025. It was a year of industry, sovereignty, and massive upsets among the alliances of New Eden. Here's to another eventful year. Happy holidays and fly safe in 2026. Okay, so that covers all of that. Let us go ahead and jump into the main topic of the day. Since you're a dev, right-clicking on cap of a ship gives it enter force field password. I'm guessing a class POS is a super class of class ship. What? Enter force field password. I'm guessing class POS is a super class of class ship. Oh, well, so I'm not 100% sure what you're asking here. So like the right-click enter force field password is to allow you to be able to enter into a POS bubble while not being part of the POS's corporation. If you have the correct POS shield password typed in, then the POS will accept you as like one of their own and not shoot at you and let you into the shield. Whether or not that has anything to do with like how POSs work operationally in the background, I'm not 100% sure. I do know that citadels are in a way like a strange, or like player structures, upwell structures are a kind of like fancy ship in a lot of ways. But about to get to, well, I just had to warm up a little bit. So yeah, I think that's the enter POS shield password is just to be able to use the, to be able to enter into POSs without them being nasty to you. Otherwise, you get bounced off the shield. All right. So let us begin. Today we are going to be discussing tanking in EVE Online. We've been doing a series of kind of starter guides. We did weapons. First, we did turrets and launchers and stuff. And I kind of put off doing this topic for a while just because there's been a lot going on. But it is towards the end of the year, so I definitely wanted to keep this, finish this up. We will be using the EVE University's post about tanking as our major source for information. That linked is down below and in chat. Let me link it in chat right now. Okay, so the big thing here is that like when somebody joins EVE Online, tanking is one of those things that like takes a little bit of extra thinking about. If you come from other MMOs, other games, you may think of a tank as like a role that you play in a game, right? Like in WoW or in other MMOs that have the concept of the Holy Trinity, where there's a tank, a DPS, and a healer. In EVE, those three functions are more or less are just aspects of your ship. Your ship has a tank, and your ship has a DPS kind of option or whatever, right? Now, there are dedicated healing ships in the same way of like healers in other games. They're called logistics in EVE. But there aren't any really like dedicated tanking ships in the same sort of way that you would think of when it comes to video games, like with tanks and stuff. Technically speaking, there are some ways to quote unquote tank using jams as a way of like functioning almost like a taunt, but the game isn't really built around that as a concept. Instead, the tank as an expression is mostly represents the strategy your ship deploys in order to stay alive in spite of incoming fire, right? So there are effectively, 3 different ways of tanking your ship, like 3 different types of hit points. And within those types, there are sub strategies, right? So that you have the biggest ones are there's passive tanking, which means that you either have a large buffer or something along those lines. You just have a bunch of raw hit points to chew through. And then there's active tanking, where you have some sort of method on your ship to restore hit points on top of, the actual hit points that you have. Now, there is also 3 different types of, hit points, where there's shields, armor, and hull. And each one of these are kind of a different, they have their own strengths and weaknesses. And in a lot of ways, I consider hull tanking a kind of armor tanking, but we'll get to that when we get there. So the first thing that we need to talk about before we go any deeper into tanking is that we need a small refresher from our damage guides, where basically everything in EVE, almost all damage in EVE, is specified to be one of 4 damage types, be it EM, thermal, kinetic, and explosive. And now there is as of this recording, one weapon system that does do pure damage. In other words, it does damage regardless of resistances. For the most part, all damage in the game has to be one of the 4 damage types, which means all damage becomes first and foremost resisted against by your ship's resistances. So if you open up your ship's fitting window, you can see over here on the side here under defense, there is the different repair rates and stuff that you have. There's how much raw hit points you have, but then also your different resistances. So if I took 100 EM damage, then my 37% resistance will reduce that by 37%, and I'll end up taking 63% EM damage. Now, this ship has the same resistances across the board, but as you can see, I've got some resistance modules on my armor, so you can see it actually affects my armor resistances. So if I'm taking EM or thermal resistances, then I'm only going to be taking 9% of all of the damage that comes in. So for every 100 damage, I only take 9 of it. That is a huge resistance. Whereas if they hit my kinetic or explosive, then I'd be taking 49% of the damage rather than 9%. So basically, if they hit me with the same amount of kinetic damage versus thermal damage, I'm going to take very close to 5 times, because 9% versus 49%. So almost 5 times as much damage if they shoot the same amount of damage to kinetic as thermal. And that's one of the concepts about resistances in particular that is pretty critical, which is that as you get closer and closer to 100%, the amount of value from it becomes more and more magnified, right? The change from 90% to 91% is not a 1% reduction in damage. It's actually a 20 or 10% reduction in damage, right? Because with 90% resistances, you're going to be taking 10% of the total damage, or if you take 100 damage, you're going to take 10 damage. But if you have 91% resistance, you're going to take 9 damage, and 9 damage is 10% less than 10 damage. So even though, it may seem like only a 1% increase, because of the fact that you're so close to 100, it's actually a 10% closure of the gap between where you're at and 100%. So as you increase in resistances, an additional increase becomes more and more impactful in the reality of things. Now, it's also true that a lot of resistances also have diminishing returns, so you can't just continue to stack resistances indefinitely. But it is worth noting, first and foremost, when you're talking about resistances, remember that the closer you get to 100%, the more effective each tick of resistance becomes. All right, so now that is something that's true about both shield and armor types of tanks. So let's talk a little bit about the differences. The number one difference between shield and armor tanks that most people will be aware of is the idea that the shield tank has a passive shield regen, whereas armor does not have a passive shield regen. Without an armor repper of some kind on this ship, I have the hit points that I have, and that's it. I will never spontaneously restore armor hit points without some sort of repper working on the ship. Whereas with shields, all shields have a passive regeneration. And much like capacitor, this passive regeneration uses a chart that looks like this. So basically, when you hit about 25% shields, that's when your passive shield regeneration is going to be at its highest. Whereas at 100% and 0%, it's going to be at its lowest effectiveness. I think that's so. I always find it weird that this thing comes down to 0%, but I guess it's true that if you're at full shields, then you don't regenerate at all. But I mean, if you're at 0% shields, you still do regenerate some. I don't know if it actually talks about how well it regenerates at 0%. But the point of the matter is that its peak recharge is at 25%, and we did and if you see down here, there should be a formula, or they show off. Where is it? Oh no, so that's right. There's a whole extra section on passive shield tanking. So we can see here with this hurricane that's being shown, it has 81% hit points per second, and they do this math to figure out that the 81.7% hit points per second is actually its peak recharge, with its average recharge being 32%. So the recharge that gets shown on your fitting window is actually its peak recharge rate. So shield regens happen so there's a passive shield regeneration. There is no passive armor regeneration. And that seems a bit odd because, okay, well, where is the advantage of armor then? What does armor get out of all of this? And the answer to that is armor tends to have better resistances than shields. Armor is much more about buffer and resistances, while shields are more about passive regeneration and big bursty heals that cost a lot, right? So, and we'll talk about the restoration in a second, because that's another big difference between armor and shields. But we can see here, if we go and look up, if we go to the ship tree, we can look at your average, just Tech 1 ship and its resistances, and we can see that the shields have a 0% EM and a 20% thermal with a 40 kinetic and 50 explosive. But then with armor, it kind of goes the other way around, where 50% EM, 35% thermal, 25% kinetic, and 20% explosive. But here's the thing to note: while the highest is the same, explosive versus EM, the lowest is much higher, right? 20% resistance, so a fifth better than the 0% shield resistance. So already on the surface, the armor resistance profile, the generic armor resistance profile, is better than the generic shield resistance profile. And we can go look at other ships and see that this one still, like, so we have 50% EM resistance, 45% thermal resistance. So this is better than 40 and 50. Well, better than 40 and the same as 50. 25 is better than 20, and 10 is better than 0. So by default, just the flatline resistance profile of armor is better than shield. Now, it's worth noting that with Tech 2, this does change a little bit. Each race has its own damage type, right? With Amar being EM, Caldari being kinetic, Gallente being thermal, and Minmatar being explosive. So what that means is that each race has a resistance bonus for their enemy race's damage type on their Tech 2 ships. So the Amar Empire, their Tech 2 ships, we can see, actually has a huge resistance bonus to explosive, both on shield and on armor, and a better resistance. You know, T2 has better resistance profile anyways, but we can see that, like, a primary resistance bonus against explosive, because the explosive damage is the Mimitar's. Meanwhile, the Caldari State has a big bonus on thermal, because that's their empire, the Gallente's damage type. But what that means is that the Caldari ships still remain that 0% shield resistance, this giant shield hole. So every Caldari shield ship has to either plug this hole or just take more EM damage. This is one of the big reasons why EM or why shields end up having lower resistances than their opponents, because of this giant shield resistance hull. Now, the Mimitar being much more flexible, also because their enemy is the Amar, get an actual EM resistance bonus on their T2 ships, which is very strong compared to the Caldari. But it's also not as strong. It's not 80%. It's only 75%. And other T2 ships will have slightly different resistance profiles. But so the big thing is that armor has a tendency to have higher resistances, especially when we start getting into the actual modules in order to increase resistances. So let's jump into that. All right, so we have resistances. We've talked about that. Now, there are different modules that get used for armor tanking. The armor plates are just flat out buffer, but they do decrease the speed and agility. In general, armor modules and enhancements will make the ship slower and clunkier rather than and shield ships have a tendency to increase the signature radius and make them easier to hit in that way. So this is important. This is also a big reason why shield ships have a tendency to be more kitey. They try to be more faster, because, armor ships will have a tendency to try to, if they try to buff up their buffer in any way, they have a tendency to become slower and clunkier. Resistances do not actually make it slower and clunkier, which is nice. And neither does hull, but we're going to get there. So there are actually there are lots of different types of resistance mods for low slots. So we're going to try to break them down. Oh yeah, that is the big difference between armor and shield. Armor modules have a tendency to be low slot modules, and therefore they come into conflict with damage modules in particular. Whereas shield tanking modules, have a tendency to be mid-slot modules, which means that they cut more into your utility and, things like your prop and other stuff like that. So all armor modules, not rigs, or low slots. That's, yes, correct. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, like, this is one of the reasons why somebody might end up using a ship that isn't necessarily designed for it, right? Like, because if you can get away with fitting a shield ship, a shield tank on a ship that is traditionally armor, then you actually end up with a lot of extra low slots for things like damage and stuff like that. Whereas if you fit a traditionally shield ship with an armor tank, then you end up with tons of mid slots. So things like jamming ships and stuff like that, that want to have lots of mid slots to be able to use their E-War with, might go with an armor tank. So it's not always that you want to use the correct tank for the correct ship, but in general, ships with more low slots than mid slots are going to want to be an armor tank, and ships with more mid slots than low slots are going to want to be a shield tank. So, but to go into this, we're going to step down. We're going to go through this. The number one armor hardener type is the armor hardeners. This is an active module. They are type specific. So you have to have a, well, yeah, their Mimitar ships tend to be more flexible, so they end up having a more balanced loadout between armor and shields. But, okay, so the armor hardener takes the most amount of resources as far as CPU and power grid, and does require capacitor to run, but they are very effective type-specific hardeners, and these are the ones that are like most likely to get blinged out. And the reason why is because it's worth noting that the type-specific hardeners often are relatively cheap overall, especially for the type that armor or that tank is designed for, right? So if we go into the market here, now I'm in Dodixie, not in Jita, but it should be roughly similar. We can go to Hull and Armor and look up armor hardeners. And, you know, if we look at EM hardeners, we see that, actually, let's just do this, compare. We can hit compare here and just see the estimated value in a lot of these things. And we can see that, like, the Dead Space module is only 16 million, with the X-type being 69 million. Nice. Estimated. Now, X-types are like the highest end kind of resistance module. So, like, this is one of those things where if you have a type-specific hardener, especially if it's of the type that the tank is normally good at, right? Like, so armor tanks are good at EM and thermal. So an EM armor hardener, you can get an X-type for 69%, for 69 million. And if we go here, we can see that, like, if we just pull off all of these resistances, with just the one module, we see our EM resistance go from 33% with a Type 2 hardener, which is 2 million. It goes up to 70%. And with an X-type hardener, it goes up to 75%. Now, that 5%, remember, represents a 1/5 or 20% bonus, like a reduction in incoming damage, right? So 69 million ISK, technically 67 million, because that's the difference between the normal and the X-type, and you get 20% reduced damage on one module. That's why these X-type type-specific hardeners end up being so valuable. Now, and it's also why, like, if you're having problems with a mission running ship, if you're low, especially if you're low skills with a mission running ship, you know, making sure that you use type specific hardeners in particular for missions can be absolutely critical, because when you know exactly what kind of damage type that they're going to do, you can harden for that exact damage type, and then they basically take almost no damage. which is pretty cool, right? Like if even if I had just 2 of these, now I'm taking 11% damage, EM damage. That's crazy, right? So type-specific hardeners are kind of the biggest thing. Now, the big problem with type-specific hardeners, obviously, is that it's only that one type, and B, they do require activation. So that does require a capacitor, and it does mean, like, if you're trying to avoid being ganked, for example, hardeners are not necessarily optimal, because a lot of times those natives will shoot you before you even get your resistance hardeners online, and therefore they basically do nothing. Also, if you get neuted out, it turns off your hardeners, which make them basically nothing. So, you know, that is the downside of it. It's also worth noting that hardeners exist for shields as well as armor, and are basically the same sort of deal, where the type-specific shield hardeners for, say, explosive and kinetic are going to be pretty cheap compared to what you would expect. You know, if we go to modules and we go to shield hardeners, EM hardeners, we can reset all of this and then show info. No, not civilian. Compare. We can see here that the estimated price is for the X type 156 million. So that's a lot more. But again, remember, this is the weakness of shields, right? EM is where the shields has a hole, which means the demand for shield hardeners is much higher, which is what makes that value so much more. If we go instead and we look up explosive hardeners or kinetic hardeners, we should see, yeah, an X-type kinetic hardener is 37 million, guys. An X-type, in fact, what's wild about this is that you can get a Dreadgaristus kinetic for basically the same price as a Tech 2 shield hardener. So my first lesson to you guys is that if you are using a type-specific hardener of any kind, it is worth at least checking, because it may be cheaper. Look, this Domination kinetic shield hardener is cheaper than a Tech 2 and does almost the same. Is it the same? Does take more heat damage. It takes less activation cost. So it costs less capacitors to take, and it lasts for longer. So that's actually good in this case, probably. And it's cheaper. So, like, you don't ever need to use a Type 2 or Tech 2 kinetic hardener. You could always just use a Domination, or better, for relatively cheap. So this is a good reason why, as a mission runner, it's good to keep, like, a set of the X-types around, just so you can use them for your mission running ships to, you know, really, really get the most out of your tanks. So that is the hardeners, which is the most powerful of the like single type of resistances, right? So then comes all right, armor resistance coatings. Armor resistance coatings exist basically for when you don't have enough fitting for the active. Or I guess in theory, if you want a resistance without having to worry about, like, the active having to turn on your active, right? But for the most part, we're seeing that this is significantly less. We look at the EM. So no CPU usage at all on any of the coatings, and only 1 power grid usage. So this is the biggest purpose of the coatings, is the fact that they don't take any fitting at all. So if you have low slot mods, and you don't, and you just have the fitting, you don't have any fitting room, but you want to get a little bit something extra, that's where these come in. Now, the fact that they're so kind of mid makes it so that they're also extraordinarily cheap. You can see here that the Centi C-type is 2 million. Like, all of these are so cheap. Most of these Dead Space coatings are actually cheaper than the Tech 2. Mostly because just very few people ever use them, right? But what they end up using instead is the energized coating. So we can look at this versus energized resistance membranes. And we can see that here, the energized does do significantly more resistances, but it takes that extra 30 teraflops of CPU. No more power grid, but 30 teraflops of CPU. So if you have the extra fittings and you want a type specific hardener that doesn't require resistance, or that doesn't require turning on, then you can use the energized, which a lot of people do. Now, it's worth noting that on the shield side of things, you don't quite have this same option. You have shield resistance amplifiers, right? And these are basically the equivalent of the energized, right? Because 30 teraflops, 30 teraflops. But if you notice, there's no such thing as the coating. The coating doesn't actually, there's no like completely passive, no fitting version of the shields. So the coating, the no fitting coatings are one of the things that makes shield resistance, or armor resistances more than shield resistances, but that's not even really that big of a thing because very few people use coatings. It is worth noting that if we look here, so there is a set of skills that affects resistances, but it's kind of confusing. So we're going to look at it really quickly. If we go to armor, we can see that there is EM armor compensation, thermal armor compensation, kinetic armor compensation, and explosive armor compensation. And it says 5% bonus to explosive resistance per level for armor coatings and energized membranes. So this skill, we can see here, if we go back here, we can right-click show info on this and see that the amount of resistances is not being affected at all, right? Like there's nothing bonusing that resistance on this ship. But if I go to the EM membrane, we can see, hey, look at this. My EM compensation skill has increased this from 38% to 48%. And with this one, it's increased it from 27% to 34%. So these compensation skills only affect the modules that affect resistances, but does not require any activation, right? Now, there is one more resistance module that exists that doesn't require activation, which is, instead of being type specific, you can get a general armor or like resistance module, in which case, in this case, it's called the energized multispectrum. There is no non-energized version of this. There is no coding version of the energized. But we can see here that the energized also accepts the armor compensation skills, 20% to 25%. So, but there isn't the equivalent of this in shields. So if we go and look at the shield resistances, shield resistance amplifiers, there are the 4 type specific, but there's no generic non-type specific shield amplifier that doesn't require activation. There's only a multi-spectrum shield hardener. And if we check this, we see that that does not get any bonus from my shield compensation skills. Whereas if I go for one of these amplifiers, it does use my shield compensation skill. Now, the thing here is that a lot of people, most people prefer the activated hardeners, right? Either the multi-spectrum or even a type-specific hardener, especially when it comes to shields, which means that the shield compensation skills, not the skill shield compensation, but the rest of the compensation skills, so shield compensation, where is it? Yeah, shield compensation's good. It does less capacitor need for shield boosters. That's good. But the type-specific hardeners, resistance per level for shield amplifiers, only affect the passive shield hardeners, which a lot of people don't use. So that's not necessarily going to be as valuable of a skill for you. But for armor tanks, those type-specific resistance modules, the multi-spectrums are a very, very popular resistance mod for a lot of armor tank, and you can see it is affected by type-specific compensation. So that's something to keep in mind. The other resistance mod is the damage control. The damage control does a little bit, or does stuff for all types. So this is actually one of those weird things where there are technically shield well, there's actually several like low slot modules that'll help with shields. There are basically no mid slot modules that will help with armor. I'm pretty sure that's correct. Yeah, there are no mid slots that help with armor, but there are low slots that help with shields. And one of those is the damage control, right? The damage control does give out some resistances for shields and armor, which is why a lot of people like the damage control. Now, granted, the damage control's most of its resistance is in the hull, but most people, when they're fitting a damage control, they do it for, obviously, either the shield resistances or the armor resistances. Now, it's true that, in general, you're going to want an energized versus a damage control, right? So if we look here, we can see, like, if we take off all of these, we just put on the multi-spectrum, we go to 61,000 EHP. If I put on a damage control, it goes 69,000 EHP. But a lot of this EHP is in the hull, right? It's in the hull. So this is actually only 43% resistances across the board when it comes to armor, which if I have any kind of active tank or, you know, allied rep or whatever, like the increase in resistances is an amplification of any hit points that's restored, right? Like if I have a 90% resistances, every hit point that I restore, they have to do 10 hit points of damage in order to retake that hit point because of my resistances, right? So higher resistances amplifies the value of repair. So if I'm going to use repair for this ship, I'm going to want the highest armor resistance as possible. So damage control gives me 43% resistances, and the multi-spectrum gives me 50% resistances. So already that's better. Now, but if you put multiple modules of the same type, you get diminishing returns. So if I put a second one on here, it goes to 61%. But if I put a damage control on here, it goes to 57%. Still a little bit lower, right? Okay. So if I put a third energized membrane on here, it goes to 67%, and it warns me that I'm now starting to hit diminishing returns, right? And so each module that affects the same stat in the same way, stacked on top of each other, have this diminishing returns. This is true all over the place. So if I take this off, it's at 67. And if I put this on, it's 67. So now I get the same exact resistance bonus from using a damage control as I get for using another energized membrane, which with the previous two, that wasn't the case at all. What's going on here? Well, you can see that actually it's not giving me a stacking penalty. So the interesting thing here is the damage control does not stack with the rest of the resistances because it's considered a different type. So that's one of the things that makes damage controls kind of interesting, is that they are not stacking penalized with the rest of your resistance modules in the same way. But it is still true that the first two tanking modules, if you just want general resistances, you're going to want multi-spectrum, and then damage control if you're wanting to go with full effectiveness. Now, there's another thing that makes low slots far cooler, or armor tank cool compared to shield, which is the where is it? Is it a? I think it's just a hardener, right? Yeah, the reactive armor hardener. So the reactive armor hardener is really the special thing when it comes to armor versus shields. This is very similar to it basically gives a damage control level of resistances. So we can see here. It also is not modified by my skills because it's an active module, but it's 15% across the board in the same way as the damage control is. Let's just check something real quick, actually. Just want to see. And we can see here that the reactive is actually not stacking penalized either with the resistance modules. That's really interesting too. So what makes the reactive so cool is that every cycle it takes in all of the damage that you've received from that cycle and tries to adjust your overall resistances to match the incoming damage. This is cool for a couple of reasons. One, it means that theoretically speaking, if you're only taking one or two different types of damage and you know that you are, this thing can be just as good, if not arguably better than some Dead Space modules when it comes to armor hardener, right? The other thing, or resistances, the other thing that is really cool about this module is that it compensates for your resistances as you have in your ship. In other words, if you have, if you're taking even damage across the board, but say your explosive resistances are weaker than your other resistances, the reactive armor hardener will actually shift towards explosive to compensate for your active damage hull. So the armor hardener the reactive armor hardener is extraordinarily good at being an armor hardener in all kinds of different situations. Now, you can only have one of them on your ship at a time. Reactive will bias to EM completely when taking dot damage. Well, that's interesting. I mean, it's not like it really matters that much because the dot damage is the one type of damage that doesn't have a type specific. But maybe that's because, like, secretly back behind the scenes, it is EM damage because everything has to be something. I don't know exactly. But the point of the matter is that the reactive armor hardener adjusts to where you're at. Now, there is a piece to this, which is that when it every cycle, it tries to recompensate, right? And it's got a 10-second base, 5-second with skills, and it can only compensate a certain amount per cycle. Does it say? I do not believe. Module will spread 60% resistance over the 4 damage types, starting at 50% each, or 15% each. It doesn't show how much it aligns, but it'll take 3 or 4 cycles or so, 2 to 4 cycles to fully adjust its resistance profile, which, you know, if you're exactly the wrong type of resistance, means it could take upwards of 10 to 20 seconds before you're fully aligned to a new resistance profile. So one of the things that people will do if they suspect that you're going to be doing a reactive armor hardener is that they'll do damage, maybe low damage, with a specific damage type, right? Like maybe if I just so happen to have some EM drones, I'll throw that on the guy for a little while, let that reactive hardener to turn to EM, and then immediately slam them with, say, explosive damage. Because now the reactive armor hardener has switched away from explosive towards EM, and then I have 10 to 15 seconds of slamming into them with explosive damage before the armor hardener can compensate. The best example of this is actually during the winter event that's happening right now. The majority of the site does EM and thermal damage, causing your reactive armor hardener to profile to that. But the final boss actually comes with a missile that does a high amount of explosive and kinetic damage. So it does actually all 4 damage types. But if your if your reactive is already tailored towards EM and thermal, then you'll be taking a whole bunch of that explosive kinetic damage. And the secret here is that if you shut off the module and then turn it back on, it resets back down to neutral. So if you're off course, normal rats also have missiles, right? I didn't see too many other missiles within the actual site other than EM and thermal outside of the nightmare, but that's not the point. The point here is that if for some reason, as a reactive armor hardener enthusiast, you find yourself suspecting that your resistances profile is misaligned or about to be misaligned, you can simply decycle the armor hardener and return it on, and it starts back over at 15 across the board and then reacts from there. So that's a little bit of a pro tip. So besides that, that's basically all of the resistances. Let me make sure shields don't have some extra type of resistance that I am not thinking of. They do not. Okay, great. So that's how to increase resistances besides rigs, which there are rigs on both sides for resistances. We have the different armor reinforcers, which armor reinforcers do reduce your agility, how fast you can get up to speed. I think these are the ones that used to do inertia. A lot of the rigs used to do your mass, and instead, not inertia, but it used to be mass, but now it's agility. And these can be compensated with your armor rigging skills. This is one of those things that, like, we talked about this with weapon rigging, that weapon rigging has a tendency to be noticed because a lot of times people have a fit. If you have a fit with a weapons rig on it and your CPU or power grid is blown out, you may be able to train up 1 or 2 levels of your weapon rig in order to get that extra resources, because the weapon rigs make your weapons take more resources to fit. Tanking rigs end up being like falling into the background a lot more. So this might be something to take into mind, because they don't like mess up your fit, but they do make you less effective. So with armor rigs, it tends to affect your agility, slowing you down. And with shield rigs, it tends to bloom your signature radius, making you easier to hit, right? That's true. We'll go over the specialty ones too. Not Henry. That's a good point. We will cover those. So, but there is no general resistance rig, either for shields or for or armor in neither way. And yeah, this one increased signature radius due to shield resistance rigs. So, and of course, shield signature radius makes you faster to lock and easier to hit, especially with turrets and missiles, right? So, okay. There are, you're right, let's go ahead and talk about the final remaining armor resistance stuff, where we have, what is this? Yeah, it's armor hit points. That's armor hit points. Okay. Well, the other two that we have capital flex hardeners, which these are able to be used on capital ships and they can be fit to capital ships, including the Avalanche, the Upwell freighter. But these things are pretty cool in the fact that they actually use scripts that allow them to select what kind of resistances that they have. But these are, obviously a little bit rarer because these are part of capital ships, just to give an advantage to capital armor tanking, because shields are extremely popular. And then there's also, along with damage controls, there's a special type of damage control, which is the assault damage control. Now, the assault damage control is a special kind of damage control that can only be used on assault ships. So assault frigates and assault battle cruisers. Oops. We can see here that the assault damage control actually has a lower resistance profile than its standard component, standard equivalent. So it's only 7.5% instead of 12.5% for shields, 10 instead of 15 for armor, and 30 instead of 40 for hull. So it's a lower overall effectiveness. However, assault damage controls, unlike normal damage controls, can be activated. And when it's activated, it increases resistances by 75%. So basically, while an assault damage control is active, it's significantly more tanky. And it lasts for about 10 seconds. Now, some of this stuff gets modified by skills, of course. But so with assault ships like the assault frigate and the assault cruiser, they can decide between using a standard damage control and just have good resistances, normally, versus an assault damage control where they sacrifice some of their like all the time resistance for this 10-second burst of like, oh my God, you cannot hurt me at all, right? Or at least very, very little. So that's the assault damage control. Now I think that is it for resistances. So now the other way to that is part of your another piece of your local tank is your buffer, right? Now buffer can be both for armor and armor, hull, or shields, right? You can make your buffer out of armor, hull, or shields. Armor comes mostly from plates, but again, plates come with this mass addition, so that makes you slower and clunkier. And there are skills, including armor layering, which reduces that effectiveness. There's also the layered armor coating and layered energized armor membranes, which are extra hit points. But these are interesting because see this? So this plate, hold on. This plate gives straight up 4,000 hit points, right? Whereas this one gives 16%. So this is a flat amount, and this is a percent amount. So there might be good reason to use one versus the other. So we can see here, 13,000, almost 14,000 armor, and then we add this thing on here, and now it's 16,000 armor. Whereas if we add another one of these, it's 21,000 armor, so that's another 4,000. So these things are adding 4,000, where this one is adding almost 14,000, like 2,000. So this thing's a lot less effective as far as how many hit points that it's adding on, right? But you can see here, it doesn't actually increase the mass at all. So that's actually the big benefit, right? If I want to put another one of this, we can see that my navigation goes from 93 meters per second. Wait. Am I just so slow that it doesn't matter anymore? Well, either way, my align time goes from 8.39 to 8.63. So you can see that I'm a lot slower to get to alignment. That also means I'm a lot slower to get up to speed, right? Whereas if I put on these membranes, nothing changes when it comes to my actual navigational skills. Now, what's unfortunate, though, is because this is percentage, here's the thing. This one adds 4K. This one adds 4K. This one adds 4K. This one adds 4K, etc. But because, and that's because these are a flat number. Because these are a percentage, what we'll see is, oh, never mind. I was wrong. I thought these were, strengthen the integrity of coding layers. Is there something else going on here that I'm not aware of? Hold on. It is only affecting hit points. It isn't stacking penalized, which is actually not what I expected. Let's see here. If I just want to double check, because these are actually something that doesn't get used very much. So let's try an EM coding. Okay, it doesn't affect the EM coding. I'm just trying to make sure, integrity of coding layers. So it doesn't affect those. No, it's just hit points, even though it says that it does the effectiveness of codings. It does not actually do that. It's just hit points, and it's not necessarily as good as even a plate. I don't, that's what I'm checking right now. Oh, layered? No, that's layered codings. No, I mean, it doesn't look like it. I'm assuming it doesn't do it for membranes either. Nope. That's weird. Very strange phrasing. Maybe. Okay, I think that it's just because, hold on, layered coding. Yeah. So layered coding increases the hit points, and layered energized membrane increases the hit points even further. That's all it's saying, right? So this is 16%, but does take 30 teraflops of CPU, whereas this one doesn't take any CPU, but only does 9% instead. But yeah, it's not, you're right, it's not penalized by speed, it's alignment and acceleration. Yeah, it's not about how fast you go, it's about how well you get up to speed. I thought mass might have affected top speed, but I guess not. Okay, so that is armor buffer. You know, we've got these armor plates. We've got the armor coatings, which almost nobody ever uses. The plates slow you down quite a bit and take a bit of fitting. But then there's also the other kind of armor buffer, which is the damage control hull tank, right? So if you are just using a buffer tank for armor, which a lot of PvP does, right? Because if you look at how much reps a repper module will do, often it will take a long time for a repper to make up the amount of hit points a single plate can do, right? So most of the time people will go with just buffer if you're wanting to have big PvP fights or whatever, or last for as long as possible, whereas PvE is more about sustainability and so reps. But in the event that you are going for buffer, this is why hull tanking in faction warfare and other PvP sort of situations are so good. Because while armor is going to have all these different modules to help improve the resistances, you get this really nice, stable 60% resistances across the board with just this one module. And then from there, you can pick up hull upgrades. You can pick up reinforced bulkheads for armor hit points and get a lot of extra hit points without actually adjusting your alignment at all, without adjusting your acceleration at all. So you can still have a lot of get up and go while still having a lot of extra hit points with a hull tank, right? And you can even do the hull, there's hull tank rigs as well with transverse bulkheads, which again, it's cargo capacity for this and this. So you're going to be able to have less cargo, but who cares if you're a PvP ship? So this is why you see a lot of hull tank in, especially like faction warfare PvP ships, especially amongst Gallente ships, you know, because they want to be able to have their get up and go while still having their buffer. Now, it's worth noting that hit point for hit point, it's still going to be better to tank buffer armor, you know, if you got plates and put them in here. But that armor is going to make you less agile at the same time. So now with shields, though, this kind of changes a bit because shields do not have to combine their armor. Like their buffer is also a kind of rep, right? So while armor relies on either remote reps or armor reps to regain hit points, shields have passive regen. And we saw in that chart that passive regen is based on its your total hit percentage of hit points, with your peak recharge being at 25%. But the other interesting thing that's about peak recharge is that recharge has actually two different stats that apply in how they work. You would think that they would be one, but it's actually, there are two independent skills or like attributes. And that is your shield recharge time and your total shield hit points. Okay. Now the key here is that the recharge time is how much time it takes to go from 0 hit points to full hit points. So according to this, if this shield ship, or if this ship had its shields completely wiped away, it would take 2,499 seconds. That seems that's a long time to fully recharge your shields from empty to full. Okay. And that amount, so in that 2,500 seconds, it will have restored 9,000 shield hit points, right? And that means that at its peak recharge, it's healing 8 hit points a second. Okay. Now, most of the time it's going to be less than that, blah, 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 because of the peak recharge time or whatever. But like to go from 0 to full, 2,500 seconds, 9,000 hit points. We can change this stat in 2 different ways. We can affect both the amount of hit points and the recharge rate. And these are separate and distinct stats. Modifying one does not modify the other. So But one is shield regen speed and the other is speed. What? I'm not, we'll look at those. So if we go to shields and we go to shield extenders, when we put a large shield extender on here, we're going to see something, which is that the time stays at 2,500 seconds, but the total hit points increases to 12,000 from 9,000, which increases my recharge rate to 12 hit points per second. Oh, we'll look at that. So we can increase the amount that we passively regen by increasing the total amount of buffer that we have. This is one of the things that's very, very strong about the ships that can do fully passive shield fits, is that unlike armor, where you kind of have to balance between your repping power and making sure that you have enough buffer to survive any kind of alpha hit, with shields, increasing your buffer also somewhat increases your shield regen, which is pretty cool. The other way is you can actually just reduce the shield recharge time. So we have a shield recharger, which does basically the opposite, right? So now it's the same amount of hit points, 9,000 hit points, but 2,000 or 2,100 seconds. So we cut almost 400 seconds off of our time, and this brings us our passive regen to 10 hit points per second. Okay, so theoretically speaking, that big buffer mod is better than the regen mod, but we're going to look at it real quick. So if we go back to that shield extender, we can see that the shield extender takes 45 CPU and 120 megawatts of power, and that's with my skills affecting it. Whereas the shield recharger takes less CPU and basically no power grid. So while it is true that the passive recharger is less effective overall when it comes to the increasing of the tank, it takes a significantly less fitting. And also, remember, these two stats are actually independent, which means reducing your recharge time increases the value of any buffer, and buffer increases the value of your recharge time. So every single passive fit requires individual finagling to figure out what is best, right? So like right here's 14 HPS. I can remove this. This raises it to 18 FPS, or HPS. This brings it to 16 HPS. So if I go to here and then we go again, this is 21 and this is 21. And this is interesting because it's not actually, this is not the same as with the armor one, right? Because these shield extenders are an absolute amount, just like the armor plates, right? So shield hit point bonus. So these are not getting diminished returns. So the fact that the shield recharger is catching up with the extender in effectiveness is actually because as your total goes up, reducing the time, it becomes more and more and more effective. And what's fun is that we can actually see if we put a third recharger on, wait, rechargers also don't stacking penalize? Cool. So now it's at 29 HPS versus 30 HPS. So once again, now that we have 3 rechargers, a third extender ends up being better than a fourth recharger. Whereas if we go here, this is the same, right? And then in the same way, for our rigs, we actually have We have the field extender. Where is it? There we go. We have an extender, which puts it to 34 HPS, but we also have the purger, which just reduces the time, so that's 37 HPS, right? So in this case, the field purger is going to be better than an extender, but that's only because of how many extenders I have. If I rip off these extenders, then if we test, the extender goes to 19 and the purger goes to 21. Okay, it's still better. Well, fair enough. There are conditions in which this changes. So you got to play around all the time to see what exactly ends up giving you the best result when it comes to hit points versus shield recharge time. And again, so like the other weird thing is that unlike armor, shields actually have things in low slots that help them as well, okay? So we have shield power relays, shield flux coils, and is it under? Let's see. There we go. And power diagnostic systems. Where's the one that's bad? Capacitor flux coils. Right? No? Isn't there one? Wait, where's the one that... Oh, no. I think this is... yeah, okay, I got it now. Okay, so let's look at each of these in turn. We have the shield power relay, right? The shield power relay gives... increases the shield recharge rate, but reduces your capacitor. So basically takes some of your capacitor and shunts it towards your shield recharge. So this is like kind of good, especially if you're going with like a passive recharge, because basically what it does is it takes some of your capacitor, which would be used for like a shield booster, right? And it turns it into a passive system instead. So we can see here that like with this with the power relay on, my time is 867. With it off, it's 1100. So that's a pretty big boost. That's 8 HP per second in this one module. But you can also see it affects my capacitor by 7 gigajoules per second in my discharge, right? So then there's the shield flux coil, which this one increases shield recharge rate while lowering the maximum shield capacity. So this one is really like, this one is kind of like cutting off your nose to spite your face, right? Because when it comes to passive regen, your two stats are raw hit points and regeneration time. So this reduces your regeneration time by quite a bit, almost 400 seconds in this case, but it also reduces my hit points by almost 2 grand. Like that's 20%. So it does bring my repair from 25 to 31. So it technically does make my overall HPS better, but when you compare it to the shield power relay, like that's a bigger bonus. Not necessarily because like this goes to 1,156, this one goes to 1229. So this actually, the shield flux coil has a bigger reduction in how much in your shield recharge time, but because it also reduces your maximum shield, it actually ends up being less impactful overall than the shield power relay when it comes to just passive tanking. So something to think about, I guess. Let's look at these two things against each other. So we can see here that the capacitor recharge rate is reduced by 35%, and the recharge rate bonus is 25%, whereas the shield flex coil has a shield recharge rate of negative 15%. So less effective, but again, you're not... Wait, hold on, my bad. 30% regen bonus versus 25 regen bonus. So the flux coil is a bigger regen bonus, but it has this 15% shield hit point bonus, which of course you could theoretically reduce by going with a restrained or possibly a Dreadgorisus. You know, the restrained reduces the penalty of it. So let's actually see real quick what happens if we go shield flux coil 2, 31 HPS versus restrained 30 HPS. So it's still technically more effective to go with the other one, but it is reducing your buffer. This is 11,500 versus 10,800. So yeah, restrained will help you keep some of your hit points, but you do lose some of that regen. So it's kind of a balancing act, right, between these two. And generally speaking, the shield flux coil I consider to be a significantly worse module of the three. Now, what's really interesting, we've been talking about these two are kind of like give or take, right? Like we give some capacitor to get some extra regen. We give up some maximum shields for some better regen. The power diagnostic system is a little bit different in the fact that it doesn't necessarily have a drawback. It just gives a bonus to power grid, capacitor, and shield. So this is like the one-all module. This is actually a fun one. Anytime I have a ship where I'm having an issue with any two stats, like, oh, I'm having problems with my power grid and my capacitor, or I'm having problems with shields and power grid, whatever, right? Power diagnostic systems become super fun because they do have a lower rate, right? 8.5% is lower than 25%, obviously. It's a much lower value, but it also gives that 6% bonus to power grid and 5% bonus to shield hit points and 5% bonus to capacitor capacity. So these just become stupid good modules to just throw on there. If you need a small boost to a couple of these things, this really helps jump in there. And like, especially when a lot of like active shield tanks that require a whole bunch of extra power grid and a whole bunch of extra capacitor, these power diagnostic systems become one of the better low slot modules for these kinds of things. And yeah, faction power diagnostics is really good. All right. Yeah, and remember that like buffer is also really important when it comes to even passive regen, because the longer that you stay around 25%, the better your buffer resistance or your buffer regen is, or sorry, your passive regen is, right? So if you get to 40% and then they slam into you and you go down to 20%, then you never actually get the full value of your regen, right? So you need to be able to like hold in that 25 to 30% range in order to get the maximum regen that you want. Now, obviously, most passive shield tanks will want to hit equilibrium with the incoming damage far before they hit that 30% marker, but still. Yes, Supers and Titans almost always use power diagnostics because those small percentages represent big, big gains in those huge ships, right? Whereas like plates and stuff, you need even bigger, like you need huge plates to do a big advantage, or huge extenders to make a big advantage. But, you know, power diagnostic systems, all percentages, baby. So, you know, big impact on big ships. I think that's it for resistances and passive regen, right? So now the final piece of kind of, well, the other thing about tanking, we did talk about signature. It reduces your incoming damage. So speed and signature, as well as distance and range, ends up being a critical piece to all of this, which is why shield ships, which end up being fast but have large signature radius, have a tendency to want to go with like missiles that go far and also do not depend on your own personal speed. Whereas turrets, you can end up going so fast that you actually out-track yourself and end up making it so you can't apply damage as well. So, you know, shield ships like to have missiles. Armor ships tend to like to have armor, especially if they can project out, right? So, but let's talk a little bit about repair, because that is the other big way that shields and armor are different. And hull. First of all, hull repair is a joke. Never do it. It's dumb. It's super inefficient. We're just going to leave it there. It's like one of those things that, like, if you happen to have hull damage and somebody happens to have a hull repair drone, then that's great. But it's not an in-combat ability. They're intentionally too inefficient to be used. So we're not even going to discuss active hull tanking. So what we have left is shield boosters and armor reppers. And to showcase these two, I'm actually going to show a special type of both of them because they reveal something about the strengths and weaknesses of each type. And that is the ancillary boosters. Both armor and shields have an ancillary booster. In both remote and local types. So don't worry about that. And so each tank type has when it comes to repair, has strengths and weaknesses, okay? When it comes to shields, shields are big, fast, and responsive, okay? When you hit rep, when you hit a shield booster, as soon as you hit that shield boost, you get those hit points. It's immediate, which is why it's much more responsive. Whereas with an armor rep, the amount of repair that's done by the armor rep is actually done at the end of the cycle versus the beginning of the cycle. However, the shield module is going to take a lot more power than the armor module, right? So we're gonna, let's look at hold on. We look at the large armor repair 2 and large shield booster 2. We'll see that the armor repair 2 gives 900 hit points, 920 hit points every 15 seconds. Whereas the shield booster, large shield booster, gives 276 every 4 seconds. So 4 times almost 4. So hi. Hey, hold on. Puppy girl, you want to come say hi? No? Okay. So, pulling up the calculator real quick just to do this. We can see 276 times 4. So it's doing 1,100 hit points every 16 seconds as opposed to 920 hit points every 15 seconds. So a little bit more hit points for the shield booster, but we're also seeing that its activation cost, right? So this is going to activate 4 times as many times. So once again, 160 times 4 is 640 gigajoules versus 400 gigajoules. So the large armor repairer is going to be more efficient than the large shield booster. However, there's actually another piece to this, which is that a lot of people end up fitting oversized shield boosters, right? So if we look up the extra large shield booster, we can see that the extra large shield booster, I mean, yeah, my fitting is garbage right now, but that's only because I have all these other things on here. Probably the flux coil, right? No. Either way, my point is that you can easily get a ship that is cap stable with an extra large shield booster. In fact, here, we can just show an example of one. Here is my Megathron, or sorry, Machariel rather, and it uses an extra large shield booster. Now, it's not cap stable, and that's a very common thing, but it uses this oversized shield booster to become even stronger than the normal shield booster, right? So this is going to be 900 hit points every 4 seconds. Now, this is obviously a much fancier version. But, you know, even if we just compare these two things, we're going to see that this is 690 hit points. So, like 2/3 of the hit points, but every 5 seconds. So it's going to do 3 times as many cycles as this. So it's going to get 690 times 3, 2,000 hit points in the same amount of time that this armor repairer does 920. So over twice as much hit points, but it does take 400 times 3, which is what, 1,200? Yeah, 1,200 gigajoules instead of 400 gigajoules in that same time. So much, much higher capacitor cost, but much, much, much higher hit points. And remember, the difference here is that this armor repairer reps at the end of the cycle, whereas the shield reps at the beginning of the cycle, which means that, and we can also look at the fitting, right? So the fitting here, the CPU cost is a lot more here, but the power grid usage is so much more than the shield booster. Look at that. A large armor repair 2 takes 4 times almost the power grid of an XL shield booster. So what this means is that in general, when it comes to fitting these sorts of things, you fit these oversized shield boosters in order to get more reps. But when it comes to armor, you actually tend to, because like trying to oversize an armor repairer doesn't really work, right? Trying to put a large armor repairer on a medium ship, for example, doesn't really work. So what ends up happening is armor tanks have a tendency to use multiple armor reppers and turn them on or off depending on how much reps that they require. Whereas shield boosters have a tendency to have one large shield booster with a shield boost amplifier alongside it to give it help, right? Because that is another piece of what makes shield boosters unique to armor repairers, is that shield boosters can have shield boost amplifiers. So rather than having multiple modules, so they have the one huge booster, for example, right? Although, let's just go with the large for now. You have this large booster, but rather than have a second large booster, which kills my capacitor even more and gives me 138 HPS with 2 large shield boosters, I can actually drop this off and then go down to a shield boost amplifier. There it is. Jeez, it's hiding from me. And this doesn't quite get the same amount, 138 versus 98. So the shield boost amplifier isn't quite as big as having a whole second shield booster, but it doesn't take any more capacitor at all and a lot less fitting, right? 55 teraflops and 1 megawatt. So in general, a shield ship will have one big repper and a shield boost amplifier as a secondary module, whereas armor tanks have a tendency to have like dual or triple reps in order to make it work. Now, what does this have to do with the ancillary? So in both the cases of the ancillary shield booster and the ancillary armor repairer, what happens is it adds, you use another item as a charge in order to compensate for what that tank type is bad at, okay? So the ancillaries are bursty modules that have this long, or, like have so many charges as they have the piece, the charges in them that makes them more effective than a Tech 2 module. But when they do not have their charges, they are worse than their module at the thing that they're worse at. What just happened? Huh. That's weird. My stats on YouTube seems to be weird. All right. Either way, doesn't matter. So the shields, the thing that makes shields weak is they take so much capacitor. Okay, it fixed it. Never mind. That big cap cost, especially with an oversized shield booster, ends up being incredibly expensive, right? So what it does is it takes cap boosters, which are normally used in cap injectors to give you capacitor. Well, it takes these little packets of capacitor and it uses those instead in order to pay for the cost of the shield boost. Now, I will say this right now. Some people ask which capacitor or which charge to use. The answer is, in your ancillary shield booster, always use the smallest charge available, because it will use one charge per cycle, regardless of what charge type it is. And the bigger cap boosters are bigger in size, which means you can load less of them. So you actually get more effectiveness out of smaller boosters than bigger boosters, right? So if I go here and I put in my 200, you can see I only get 5 uses before I run out and have to reload. If I use 150s, I get 7 uses before I have to reload. And if I use Navy 150s, I get 9 uses before I have to reload. So you would only ever really want to use Navy 150s in your large ancillary shield booster, for example. And this makes it so that you can have basically these big boosters on these ships. As long as you can fit them on, you don't have to pay the capacitor because it's paid for by these boosters. Now, on the armor side, the thing that armor is weak at is that they're relatively anemic in how much they rep compared to shield boosters, right? So what armor repairer does is it takes nanite repair paste and it uses it to amplify the amount it repairs. So we can see here, armor repair amount is 47.4 HPS. And if I put the nanite repair paste in here, it jumps up to 142.3 HPS, right? So again, that is, let's see here. Let's see, 142, right? If we go with that's 123. An A type isn't even as good. An X type is not as good. So a ancillary armor repairer with its nanite repair paste in it is stronger than the X type of the standard armor repairer. But without the it in there, we can see it actually becomes the worst. Yeah. It becomes, and the ancillary becomes worse than even tech meta 0, right? Meta 0 is 690. Large ancillary armor repper without paste is 518. With the paste is a lot better, okay? So that ancillary armor repair, or ancillary reppers really show off the weakness of the type. So, you know, shields have big capacitor costs. Armor is slow but steady and efficient as far as capacitor costs. So the ancillary shield booster consumes shield charges cap charges in order to alleviate that cap cost, whereas armor repairer uses nanite repair paste to make it so that it reps for significantly more than it would normally. So this is why, like, a lot of times I will have dual rep ships where I have 2 reppers on my armor tanks, with that second repper being an ancillary, in the idea that, like, I'm designed to operate off of the one repper most of the time. But if I need a second repper, that second repper is amplified quite a bit, right? It's also why, like, say the whole new Tristan, you know, if you're using reppers in PvP, as I mentioned earlier, buffers tend to be more popular in PvP just because of how much more hit points you can get from, like, a plate. You know, if you think about it, like, even this nanite repair paste, or even this one, right? If I put in the nanite repair paste, if I put in the nanite repair paste, it does 1600 HP every 11 seconds. This gives me 4,000 hit points. So even with this best one, it would take me almost 30 seconds before the repper outperforms the plate. And even then, I'm going to run out of charges sooner rather than later. So, you know, especially when you're talking about a frigate level where fights are very quick, often a plate will be best. But if you are going to use a repper, you might as well use an ancillary, so that way you get the most out of it for the time that you are alive, right? So there's that. Now, when it comes to remote is basically where kind of things collide, in the fact that they're sort of the same. There's both remote and shield. Both are high slots. Should be noted that people usually heat their ancillary armor reppers. Yes, you should usually have your ancillary armor repper heated, just like your cap booster. I memorize that the medium ancillary armor is approximately equal to an 800 millimeter plate. Yeah, except for it won't slow you down, which is nice. So when it comes to shield with remote, though, you know, there are both good Logi ships for shields and good Logi ships for armor, obviously. As of right now, it's definitely true that there are more options for armor, but shields are very, very good. And this is where things kind of, like, some of those details kind of collapse down, because obviously, like, so if you are going to be in a fleet that has dedicated Logi, your primary objective on your tank is going to be to maximize how many resistances you have, because that amplifies the value of your Logi ship, right? As we said before, the higher your resistances, the more valuable healing becomes. But you do still need to have enough buffer to survive whatever alpha's coming in, be it PvP or PvE. Now, when it comes to remote reps, the armor and shields do maintain their differences in the fact that armor happens at the end of the cycle, whereas shields happens at the beginning of the cycle. So a lot of shield logi really appreciate the fact that they can be super reactive when it comes to how things are going. They can have just enough modules active for what they need at this exact moment. Whereas armor have a tendency to want to, again, be this slow and smooth, slow and steady repair. So chances are, if somebody's going to be taking damage, when they start taking damage, you want that armor repairer to already having been run on them. So that way the cycle ends sooner rather than later, right? So a lot of times I will keep armor reps on people that I presume are about to take damage. Whereas with shields, I tend to try to hold off as much as possible, conserve my capacitor as much as possible, and only apply at the exact moments that they're necessary and be more reactive, right? With armor, I'll usually keep I'll keep one, maybe two in pocket and try to keep the rest of them out and running just in case something happens, right? Now, obviously, if they are running, you have to decycle them in order to switch it to somebody else. But the other big difference between armor and shield here is that armor have a tendency to have a very short optimal range, right? Sorry. Armor has a tendency of having a longer optimal range and a shorter final range, whereas shields have a shorter optimal range and a longer fall off, right? So shield reps have a tendency to project further. Now, obviously, this ship is not a Logi ship, so its ranges are much lower. But if we pull up, say, a dedicated Logi ship, we can see like this thing has a 48 kilometer optimal range with a 62 kilometer max, final range, whereas the Basilisk has a 27 kilometer optimal range and a 67 kilometer fall off, right? These are also compacts. So if we took this and changed it to a Tech 2, 32 and 80. There you go, 32 and 80. Whereas the Guardian these are compacts too. This is 58 and 74, right? So a little bit of a balance. Shields have a tendency to reach a little bit further, but armor gets full effectiveness a little bit further than shields do. And of course, the shield reps are going to be a different amount. This is 512 hit points per second, or 512 hit points per 6 seconds. .600 hit points per 8 seconds. So they do become kind of the equivalent, but of course there are other advantage, like the resistance advantages and the speed advantages. There's a lot of things that go into like whether or not a fleet will do better as a shield setup versus an armor setup. Obviously a shield setup is going to be a little bit faster and probably hit a little bit more, whereas a armor comp will be more likely to have extra webs, extra scrams, extra, whatever, which does mean that in general, again, this doesn't have to be true, but in general, shield comps tend to want to be more range-based, whereas armor comps are wanting to be more in there hitting the dudes, right? But of course, your Logi wants to be relatively far away from the enemy target. So if your main fleet is right up in your enemy target's face, then you want your logistics to be a little bit further back. Whereas if your entire fleet is far away, like with a shield setup, it's okay for your Logi to be kind of close to your fleet because your entire fleet is far away from the enemy, right? So that's basically kind of the differences between shields, and armor, and how it comes about in like setting up your fits. Now, there is some extra ideas, like for instance, the idea of what we like to call dial tanking, where you put both armor and shield tank on a ship. This is generally seen to be a bad idea, because if you think about it, you want to apply as many modules as possible at any given time, right? The person who spends the most resources and has the most modules brought to bear at its maximum effectiveness will likely win the fight, right? So the idea is that the problem with mixing your tank, mixing guns has its own issues, but mixing a tank can have big problems, because basically if your shield tank is holding, then your armor tank is doing nothing. And if your armor tank is holding, then that means that your shield tank has already failed. So mixing the two tanks together ends up not being great, especially in PvE. There is an interesting example, actually, of where this goes, is different, which is in some especially small-scale frigate PvE or PvP, like this Breacher, right? Especially Mimitar ships in particular. So, you know, this is kind of the concept of that hull tank, hull new Tristan, in the fact that like this armor repairer and this armor repairer, like there is shield resistances, but there's no armor resistances. So I'm using one extra module because the damage control is supporting my shields, but I'm using one extra module here, and instead of doing extra damage, which I wouldn't even be able to fit anyways because I don't have a good fitting, I just get more raw hit points. And sure, it's not optimal because it's not more shield hit points, but if once I've gotten 2 armor, yeah, it's common in bait ships. The idea is that you get down 2 armor, and then you just blast both reppers, and it just pours as many hit points into it as possible. So double active rep is not unheard of, and double buffer is not overly unheard of when it comes to, say, hauling ships or something like that, or like travel fit ships. But those are kind of the only times that you'd want to mix your tanking. All right, let's see if we missed anything. I know I didn't even use this page very much. There is a couple of other things. One is that the reppers rig, there are 2 armor repper rigs. One of them increases the amount per cycle. The other one speeds up the cycle. This is they both increase the power grid use for reppers, but the key here is that one, because it increases its speed, it cycles more often, which means you get more hit points, but it also means it takes more capacitor because it's consuming your capacitor more often. It's actually one of those interesting things about armor setups that is kind of unusual. Every once in a while, you'll find an experienced player that has a ship that is not cap stable, but a newer player has that same exact ship and it is cap stable. And the reason why is because there are skills that improve these ships, or the tanking. Armor. So there's this skill, repair systems, right? This reduces the repair system's duration per skill level by 5%. This does not reduce the capacitor cost of those reppers, which means a person with repair systems 5 will spend 25% more capacitor running their armor tank than somebody with repair system 0. which is why a more experienced pilot might be not cap stable, while a less experienced pilot is cap stable. Now, granted, that less experienced pilot is losing out, right? Like they're repping slower, but it is just one of those interesting little quirks. And this does pop up in this as well, in the fact that the nanobot accelerator speeds up your cycle time and increases it by more, basically. Whereas the ancillary nanopump increases the amount per cycle, but overall effectiveness is less. This is even more important when it comes to those ancillary, right? Because ancillary is, there's only so many cycles before you run out of nanite repair paste. So this one will let you get the most out of your ancillary, while this one will burn you through your ancillary faster. You'll get more of the hit points faster, but it will also run out of ancillary faster as well. So just an interesting balance between these two. Additionally, I tend to, of course, like ancillary nanopumps because I feel like it's bonus for free. But in the end, nanobot accelerators do end up being technically more effective pound for pound, usually. In addition to that, there are implants. So there's the 6 series implants, which, remember, the 6 series is in conflict with all of your fitting, your main fitting implants, and also all of your omegas. So any set that you have, any pirate implant set or whatever, you'll want that 6 slot for an omega to get the maximum effectiveness. So you have to give up both of those in order to have the 6 slot series, which is a 1 to 6% duration bonus, which again, just realize that can also affect your cap stability. Then you have the 7 series, which is a remote repair, which reduces the capacitor need for remote armor repair by a certain amount. That can be really useful. Especially those ships that are trying to like balance remote repair with local repair, especially ones that are not Guardians or Basilisks, which we will talk about in a second, I guess. And the 9 series gives you a rep amount by 1 to 6%. And then there's the hull series, which is armor hit points by 1 to 6%, depending on model number. But they actually miss one other set in this section, right? Which is, there's another implant. Which is this one. If you give up your 10 slot, you can get the Imperial Navy Modified Noble Implant, which is 3% bonus to armor hit points and 3% bonus to repair systems repair amount. So, there is that one as well that is not listed on the website for some reason. So we talked about compensation skills. We talked about armor layering skill. It reduces the amount of penalty from the armor plates. That's about it for that. And for shields, shield operation is shield recharge time. Shield upgrades is power grid cost for shield upgrades, which means if you go show info, all these things here, including extenders, basically any improvements to your shields, will have its power grid reduction by shields upgrades. Tactical shield manipulation, I think, is one of the dumbest skills in the game. So basically, one of the things that's true about shields is that when it gets below 25%, below that peak recharge time, it actually starts to bleed into armor, right? A certain amount of your damage, instead of going into the shields, actually goes into armor. And tactical shield manipulation compensates for that. So basically, when you have it below 25%, it has a 25% chance, I'm pretty sure is how it works, of bleeding over. When you have Tactical Shield Manipulation 5, that probability turns into 0, right? So all damage will just stay on shields until the shields are fully gone. You might think that this is actually good, but I would argue that this is the one skill in the game that is counterproductive. Because if you think about it, the closer you are to 25%, the better your shield recharge is. And so every hit point that you take below 25% is moving you further from that peak recharge point. So if 10% of the damage goes to armor instead of shields, that armor damage doesn't count as shield damage, which keeps your shields just a little bit higher and keeps it just a little bit closer to peak recharge rate. Now, is this a big deal? Absolutely not. But if you think about it, really that your armor hit points on a shield ship don't really mean much, right? So bleeding a little bit of damage over to armor to keep your shields up towards 25% is actually beneficial to you. Unfortunately, if you get deep enough into this game and you get into a rock wall, you have to train Tactical Shield Manipulation 5 as it is necessary for invulnerability core operations, and you have to train it to 4 in order to get the Tech 2 type specific hardeners. So there is a case to be made to not training Tactical Shield Manipulation 4, keeping it at 1 and sticking to faction and dead space type specific hardeners. Now, granted, faction and dead space generic hardeners are very expensive, by the way. We talked about how cheap type specific hardeners are. The multi-spectrums are some of the most expensive modules to bling in the game. So not a great idea long-term, but just realize that balancing your Tactical Shield Manipulation skill, it's personal preference. I would prefer to be able to keep it to 0 and still get what I want, but it is what it is. The other thing to note when it comes to logistics, right? I think this might be the final piece. If there's anything else I'm missing, please say it now. Otherwise, I think this might be the last piece, which is that, so with the 4 empires, we have 2 empires that are shield-based and 2 empires that are armor-based, right? So the Caldari and the Minmatar are ostensibly shield-based, and the Amarr and Gallente are armor-based. Now, I say ostensibly because Minmatar Republic actually does both shield and armor because its big thing is flexibility. But it is, when it comes down to it, when push comes to shove, Minmatar is, in fact, a shield race. But in addition to that, there's another division, which is what I like to think of as like group versus solo, or if you want to look at it from a burst point of view, information versus skirmish. In general, Gallente and Minmatar ships are designed to fight independently effective, whereas Amarr and Caldari ships, by comparison, are designed to be interdependently effective. And no more is this true than how Logi works. So oh shoot, hold on. All right, so if we come over here to the Minmatar side of things, we can see their Logi ship is called the Scimitar. There's the Tech 1, which is the Scythe. Down here, Scythe. And then the Tech 2, which is the Scimitar. And we can see that the Scimitar does remote shield boosters, not remote armor, right? So, but the difference here is that this thing has a bonus to remote shield and remote tracking computer, whereas the Caldari one has a bonus to shields and capacitor. So what's really happening here? What's happening here is that the Basilisk and the Guardian, given that they have these remote capacitor activation cost reductions, this is a critical piece to how these things work. So if we simulate this ship, we can see a remote capacitor transfer costs 366 gigajoules to activate and transfers 351 gigajoules worth of energy. So there's less energy generated than it takes per cycle. Watch what happens when we put this on a Guardian. When we put it on a Guardian, we see that its activation cost becomes 68 gigajoules, and its energy transfer amount is 351 capacitor. So it takes significantly less capacitor than it costs to run. And so this is why you have, spider tanking ships, especially when it comes to the Guardian and the Basilisk. These ships are designed to be in a fleet with more than one of them, so that way they can capacitor transfer each other in some kind of chain. There's multiple ways of kind of figuring out how to do that chain, and effectively generate free energy for them, right? And so this allows those ships to be much more resistant to, say, being nuded out, right? Whereas the Gallente and the Minmatar ships, they do not have that capacitor transfer. And so they're much more based around the idea of not requiring other Logi ships on field in order to be, sustainable, right? If you have two Guardians and then you lose one Guardian, you kind of don't have any Guardians anymore, because that one Guardian is going to run out of capacitor soon because it expects to have that other Guardian to feed it cap. But if you have two Oneroses and then you lose an Oneros, you still have one Oneros. You have 50% of your effectiveness. So that's kind of the difference between the way that the Minmatar and Gallente work with their more skirmishy, independent Logi ships versus the Amarr and the Caldari, which are much more locked in capacitor transfer oriented Logi ships. This does make it so that Amarr and Caldari are often more vulnerable to jams, because when you jam them out, then they're no longer transferring to their opponent. So everybody within the Logi team must be aware when somebody gets jammed out or somebody dies or something happens, they must readjust, throughout the fight in order to ensure that their cap chain doesn't remain broken or, remain stable. And whereas the Gallente and the Minmatar ships are much more about just figuring out how to survive and, keep away. Again, and they become much more vulnerable to newts, because if they get newted out, they don't have that capacitor transfer coming in to help recover. So that is how kind of Logi works, which is why we see a lot more Guardians and Basilisks in large fleets. And the Oneros and the Simi ends up being a little bit more niche. But when they show up, they can be very, very effective, even on their own. Plus, we also see a lot more of them in like the Tech 1 environments, where it's a lot more like throwaway. So you can bring like an Executor. If I'm just going to bring one or two Logi, I might just bring Executors instead of Guardians, or Scythes instead of Basilisks or whatever, or instead of Augurers and what is the Basilisk? Ospreys, right. So that about does it when it comes to tanking in EVE Online. Hopefully now you understand how you can look at a ship and understand how it should be fit. I can look at this ship and see that its fitting is 2 low-powered, 4 medium-powered. So it's pretty easy to guess that it is a shield ship, although I can hover over it too, and it says right there, shield. Whereas if I go over here and look at a ship over here, we can see that this is armor-based, and that is true because it has more lower power slots than mid-power slots. You can understand the strengths and the weaknesses of both shields and armor, where shields are very reactive and bursty and let you go fast and be agile, They do make you a little bit easier to lock and target potentially, but most importantly, when it comes to shields, you have that EM hole that must be either compensated for or you're a victim to. So your resistances are going to be a lot worse when it comes to shields than armor in general. But armor is going to be a lot slower and more methodical in how it repairs versus shields. Zarmaz is more like Armorlogy with Galente agility. Zarmaz is just a baller. But I think that might be it. Let me just check. Actually, let me just double check here. And also there's less choices with shields when it comes to how to improve your resistances. And yep, and we've seen all that. We talked about these. Rigs. We talked about the fact that there's extenders and purgers, depending on if it's hit points or recharge. Screen reinforcers. There is actually a nice rig that increases the shield booster to make them more cap protected against the big cap cost. And this one makes it so that it runs faster. But it does increase the capacitor cost. And so that's very similar to the ancillary repper. But this one, instead of making it so it boosts for more, it makes it so it boosts for cheaper, which is interesting. That's because, remember, they usually oversize these. And then this the core defense economizer reduces the power grid need. This is also useful for buffer fits, but even for allowing you to oversize things, including shield extenders and boosters. There are also shield implants. But the big ones there are going to be your crystals and nirvanas. Crystals increase the shield boost amount. Nirvanas increase the amount of hit points in the same way that armor has amulets for hit points and Asclepions for repair amount. Obviously, Nirvanas are extremely strong because not only does that improve your hit points, but it also improves your passive regen. Hull tanking, we talked a little bit about. Remote repair, we talked about. Spider tanking, that's when basically everybody has remote reps instead of local reps, and so everybody reps the one person that's under attack. This is true with a lot of Galente ships, especially since they can have drones, and so they use their high slots for things like remote reps and newts for things like Dominixes and even Vexers, but also Triglavian ships are really good at spider tanking with their utility high slots. And of course, most recently, the Confessor and Svipul have been transformed into spider tanking setups that have a bonus to remote reps, but not range, which is interesting. And of course, there are resistance module. There's the different bursters, which are kind of the equivalent for armor versus. Oh no, this is the emergency shield hull up energizer. There's also bursts, which are leadership skills. Using command ships or battle cruisers or command destroyers, etc., that can have armor links or shield links that are basically the equivalent. One does buffer, one does resistance, one does repair amount and effectiveness. But yeah, and then finally, of course, there is the pirate implant, the Savior implant, which helps with remote repair, which about a year or two ago did get buffed, so that way now it no longer impacts your capacitor drain in the same way that those other skills, like faster you turn your repper, the more the capacitor gets drained. But the Savior implants actually compensate for that by reducing the amount of capacitor per cycle as well. I think that about covers it. So yeah, let me know if I missed anything down below. But I think all that said, this has been your tanking guide in EVE Online. Tanking is, of course, a very important piece of every single fit, whether it be overtanked or undertanked. This is where knowing the situation that you're going into really allows you to maximize your effectiveness, especially in things like PvE, where if you know exactly what kind of damage type your opponent's going to do, you can tune your tank to be exactly what you need in order to do that. But remember, the more you specialize your tank, the more it's vulnerable to unforeseen circumstances. So make sure to turn your shield and armor hardeners on whenever you're in space. Get your thermodynamics up so you can overheat to get a little bit of extra resistance if you need to. And stay safe out there, guys. Until next time, I've been Ashrothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put EVE into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. If you're watching this live, hang tight. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for checking this out. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with a friend, because this is how we get people to learn more about EVE Online and become effective EVE players. We don't just make fitting guides where we say this is what to fit. I make fitting guides that explain to you how it all works. So if you like this kind of thing, make sure to like it and share it with a friend. But also give a special thanks to my top supporters, which are as follows. We have 745 MPSI, Arydanika the Queen, Bad Boy Smooth, Ebo Elite, Erladis, Elange, Flash Gordon, May, Malak Starfire, Malin, Mercuton, Mike, Neelam, LM1, Sheesh, Cicero, Thrans, and Rid. Thank you guys so much. If you do appreciate this stuff and you can, and you feel compelled to, you can please help make this possible by becoming a member or a patron or giving a super chat. But just giving it a like and sharing it with a friend is huge, and I appreciate it. But I hope that was good for you. Until next time, I've been Ashrothi, the voice of New Eden, and I'll see you in space. Ooh. All right. Cool. That wasn't so bad. Well, that was like 2 hours. Fuck. That went a lot. That was a lot longer than I thought it was, actually. All right. Well, in that case, I think if this has already been a 3-hour stream, I think I'm going to save this one for next time, which is my 10 tips for new players in EVE Online. So we're gonna do that later this week. Now, okay, so how is this week gonna go? My plan right now is tomorrow I do plan to stream. So hopefully we'll be there together. Hey, Sheesh, 070, thank you so much for your super chat at the very beginning of the stream too. Very kind of you. But so I don't know what's going to happen on Christmas. I'm actually kind of curious to know whether or not people are interested in me streaming on Christmas. Hit me up in Discord or just post a comment here if it would be valuable to you. Like, because so I don't 100% know. Like, there's a lot going on. I don't know if I might go and go to my son's mom's house to spend time with Christmas there. But like, we haven't figured out whether or not it'll all work out, because my dog and their dog isn't going to get along. So it's whether or not that can be worked out. Either way, the whole point is that I might celebrate Christmas on a different day than Christmas, which gives me Christmas Day as kind of possibly an open day. But I know that a lot of people are probably going to be celebrating their, rightfully so, should be celebrating the day with their family. So I haven't, like, I'm on the fence about whether or not it would be valuable for me to stream on Christmas Day itself. It could be possible that some people would really like it in the event that they don't celebrate Christmas or they're not able to be with family. We can all be together on Christmas here. Alternatively, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if it's useful or not. So please let me know. That's a big thing that I've been hawing about. But tomorrow should be a stream, and Friday should be a stream. We still have to cover this, which is, again, like my top 10 tips for new players checking out EVE Online. And I do want to make a video that's all about why now is a good time to start EVE Online, with everything coming with Vanguard and the rest of the year, and what this, as well as a year in review of how this year has gone. So we do have definitely more content to do. we do have a lot more content to cover for the rest of the year before the year's out. So make sure you join the Discord and let me know what you think, and flag yourself as interested in YouTube, so that way you get the latest and greatest when it comes to me going live or putting out my edited videos. If you become a member, you do get those edited videos early, and maybe some other videos that I don't necessarily feel need to be posted to everybody, but members get to have them. And then also remember, if you're returning to EVE or new to EVE, you haven't gotten your million free skill points, please consider using the link down below or in chat right now in order to get your free million skill points. That helps those who help the channel. And Convocation of Empyreans is recruiting. We are trying to maximize player engagement with EVE Online. We have activities throughout the week. And I think that should be about it for today. So all that said, I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden. I did all the other shtick already. So I'm just going to say thank you guys so much for a wonderful stream and a wonderful year. I will see you back soon. This is I will do everything within my power to not let this be the last stream of the year, because I know that a lot of content creators have gone on break, but I don't go on break. I'm here with you guys. So please show your appreciation with a like, comment, subscription, possibly a membership, maybe some merch. But until next time, I've been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and I'll see you in space. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad, Melakaliki Maka, and Haoli Maki Hiho. Thank you, Sheesh.
Bring on the wrecking machine.
Sheesh can't be the only one supporting the stream, Thanks, Sheesh. For every city